हेलो हेलो, आवाज़ आ रहा है मेरा अभी? आ रहा है, ओके थैंक यू। हेलो रवि, आप हो क्या? हम्म,
Yes, 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 Sharad.
रवि एक मिनट ना, कॉल आ रहा है मुझे। हेलो। क्या? हाँ बोलिए। हाँ हाँ बोलिए। कहाँ से? अरे मैडम, आई एम नॉट इंटरेस्टेड। अरे ये नहीं आ रही।
Vikesh bhai.
Huh.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, hi Ravi.
Good
I am unable to
afternoon.
start my. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can
Sir,
see you now, Vikesh bhai.
Justice B.N. Krishna ji has not been able to log in yet. He is having some problem. Would you kindly have a word with him and share your experience?
You want me to do that, Vikesh bhai?
Yeah, you can just speak to him. He may be, having some issue, and you can
What?
share your experience, how you did, meaning how simple
It's
it
very
is.
simple. You have to put in your name, your last name, your email ID, and you're in. That's all. You put all the
Yeah, but
instructions.
yeah.
There's nothing more I
But
can tell him. There's no other experience. I
sorry,
just put in my
sorry.
name, surname, and email ID. That's all.
It's so simple. But sometimes, the most simple things become most difficult.
Chalo.
Like we are now getting Jayashri Bhoj, who is the managing director of Maharashtra IT and MTDC, instead of Mrs. Abha Shukla.
Acha.
Yeah. So that also happened now. Just 10 minutes back, she said, okay.
I'm on the line with Justice Saab Shailesh here.
For some reason, it's saying that your email is not correct. I don't know what's the problem. I just trying to do it again.
No. You put in your name, your last name, and the
Yeah, everything else. Correct. All the questions are answered correct.
and the email ID.
There may be some.
Email ID is your Gmail or which one have? Okay.
Gmail.com. That is correct. That's
That-
exactly what is shown in your.
That's exactly what I did, and I'm very much on the call already.
Sir, I have sent him an extra general public one also.
I'm just trying.
So he can log in from the public one also.
Can you,
Sorry?
if
I'm
this
trying
is
to log in on my iPhone itself. Let's see.
okay,
I may be making some mistakes. Okay.
that's perfect. That's perfect,
Right.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Shrikant here. Good afternoon, Shailesh ji.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Yes, hi.
Hi, good afternoon, Vikesh.
Shrikanji, hearty welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining on time.
Thank
Can you put on your video, please, Shrikant?
Yeah, I'm just trying to switch it on right now.
Yeah, Mr. Rao. Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll give it to you. Yeah. Yeah, Ravi, you can just write down.
It is asking me to connect to a video address. Not sure what. Okay, now I get it.
Justice
Yeah.
Saab is coming on. Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Hi, Shrikant. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Lord. How are you doing? All well?
All well.
Good.
Vikesh bhai,
Yeah.
can you get somebody to guide Justice to come only on audio so that at least we can hear him
Yeah.
and we can
So
put his.
I have already told Manoj Raoji, he is on the line and he is doing the needful from Delhi.
Very good.
Yeah.
So
I have already
our
told him.
program is scheduled to start at 3, correct?
Yeah.
And we
And
start.
his time is much later.
What time does he
And
come on?
well, his time is 3:40 or something. But yeah, his timing is we are starting at 3:05, and his time is at 3:55.
Oh, why? What are we doing until then?
So I'm starting with 5 minutes. You are starting with 10 minutes. Then we have President uh, IOD for 10 minutes. Then we have Dr. Anand Deshpande for 15 minutes.
Okay.
And then we have Abhay Shukla for 10 minutes. And after that, we have the Chief Justice.
Okay, good. Got it.
As per the protocol, the Chief Guest speaks the last.
Of course, absolutely perfect. And
He has the final word.
I will log off after Justice's speech, huh, Vikesh bhai?
As your convenience, sir, we would be we also request you to, number one, give a summary after this session. So you will kindly give the inaugural session summary
I'll do that.
for
I'll
5
absolutely.
minutes, and thereafter every session also we would have requested you, but also at the end, if you can give us a summary of the whole conference. But for that, you have to sit through the whole thing.
So if you can please take that onus on, Vikesh bhai, because there is somebody who has come in from Delhi and he's bringing in some people who I must meet. So if you can please take on that last part, that would be very nice.
Well, as requested by you, I have Mr. Pradeep Chaturvedi for us in Delhi. I will have to request him. I think he will oblige, considering your time.
So nice. So nice of you. So nice. Thank you.
I don't see others yet joining us. So, Mr. Anand Deshpande should have been joining us by now.
Participants wise, how many have already logged in?
We would have had good participation by now. We don't have the number here, but yeah,
Okay.
more than about 45 people are already
Oh,
here.
very good. So no, that's
Yeah.
that's critical.
Yeah, more than
mass.
45 people are already here, and
Yeah.
they are walking in. I think they would be struggling similarly with this WebEx. Imagine these technology companies, and they were trying to beat Zoom. Zoom has stood tall despite everyone trying to push it.
I have made a
Is a
very
question
strong written recommendation that we should move to Zoom at IOD.
is like ease of use versus the features that are available. Zoom is
Yeah.
ease of use, so anybody can use it. Some other platform has more features, so makes it more complicated.
Yeah, and had Zoom and Geo not been there in India, imagine what would have happened. Geo gave almost free data to everyone, and Zoom gave free videos to everyone. It is only because of these two, and globally, Zoom. Samriddhi, is Mr. Deshpande joining rightly, timely? Okay. 3 p.m. Okay, good. Thank you. You will also please join. Huh? Yeah, you also please join. Thank you. Bye. Yeah. So, Zoom, for whatever it has done to the global economy with their platform, I think they should be given a Nobel Prize.
Absolutely right. I agree. Biggest enabler. Enabled us to live our life.
Huge contribution.
I know the stories where the 70-year-old music teacher who was used to all his life, maybe just giving the physical classes to the students on the music, how to learn music and all that. Overnight, turned to Zoom and started giving the.
Yeah, Mr. Raut, I gave you the number.
Giving to online classes.
Amazing, amazing.
Okay, thank you. He's still not online. Yeah. So, yeah, Mr. Raut is talking to him personally and handling this from Delhi.
Very good.
Everyone, the whole world was against Zoom.
There's some
product.
fellow spread a rumor that this is a Chinese thing, it will take away data, it will make you get into Chinese, some nonsense. Then I had to tell people that this is a pure US
Captain?
prophecy.
Okay. Thank you.
मिल गया उनको connection?
नहीं, अभी नहीं मिला उनको. And all our conversation is live, Mr. Raut. Yeah. So this is not fair. I think Justice has joined.
Justice
Okay, I joined at last.
And we don't have President yet. Yeah, President is also not joined yet.
So
it is already
happy
3
to
o'clock.
see you,
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Shailesh.
Good afternoon.
afternoon,
How is
Vikesh.
the weather in London?
Yeah,
Pleasant
good
as
afternoon,
usual.
sir.
Good afternoon.
And hearty welcome. So
Thank
very
you.
good to
Thank you.
have you with us. We are really honored, and thank you
you.
so much. And we appreciate the trouble you have taken even to log in.
And then I don't know, for some reason, last 10 minutes I've been, because I don't like to be late for any appointment.
No, it's so nice of you, sir.
I kept trying and it kept on saying your email
My
address
video
is
video
wrong.
chalo nahi, 3 baj gaye.
Terrible.
Good
We'll start in 2 minutes.
No, please start now.
Okay, fine.
Good afternoon, Justice.
Good afternoon.
Good morning. I heard you are in London, so it must be morning for you.
It's still morning here. Yeah, it's about 10:30 now.
Just on my left-hand side, you can see all the flags of United Kingdom. So I'm based in India right now.
Okay.
Sir, is the vaccine diplomacy going to yield results?
I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, the funny thing is, you have 2 vaccines. I had 2 jabs in Bombay. You are Covishield, which is the same as the one that is being used in UK.
Correct.
But when you come to UK, that is not valid. You have to again go through the whole process. I think that, as you rightly say, it's a question of diplomacy. Somebody told me that it is because of the difficulty in getting the royalty amount.
Yeah.
Will do whatever it takes to get you on their team. Because they know the value of someone who can turn information into insights. So take the be fought over by the best in the business.
Hello. Sir. Oh. Sir, sorry to trouble you. I'll have this sorted right now. Yeah. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I'll have it done. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm just getting it done. Mr. Deshpande also having a problem.
But I'm told that the cases in London, sir, are still quite alarming, and
But
they
I
are.
noticed, Shailesh, I noticed one thing. Most of the people here, they don't even wear any mask because after I came in here, I was supposed to do self quarantine for 10 days.
10 days, yeah.
But within which period I had to take 2 RT-PCR tests. I did all that, both my wife and me. But when they say that you wear a mask only when you get into a shopping mall or a theater or something. Otherwise, on the streets, you don't find anybody wearing a mask. Whereas in Bombay, it was such a terrifying thing for me. 1.5 years, I hadn't stepped out of my house. Forget walking on the streets.
Oh my God.
So it's only after coming here that I'm feeling a little bit of...
Ravi को बोलो ना start करने के लिए बोलेगा अभी.
Today, I think in Mumbai, the recognition that masks are a good protective device is very high.
हो गया ना, अब तो मेरा टाइम शुरू हो गया. मिनट टू मिनट का मतलब क्या हुआ? जी हाँ, मिनट टू मिनट स्टार्ट किया फास्ट. Now, Ravi, are we set to start now? Shall we? Ravi? Ravi, shall we start now? Ravi, are we ready to start now? Ravi, here we are.
Wonderful.
So Ravi, can you kindly play the video for our sponsors first? 30 seconds each, 2 videos. Ravi, I think you have some issue with the videos.
and see how it feels to be fought over.
Hi, Ravi. I think you have some issue with the video. We can play the video after I have finished now. Yeah, Ravi, please put up the opening slide. Well, that's it. Here we start. Ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, hello, hi. Here we go live on WebEx, YouTube, and Facebook. And it's my privilege to host you all for the next 3 hours. I am Vikesh Walia, Regional Director, Institute of Directors, Western Region from Mumbai. A very good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, depending which country you are in now. A very warm welcome to our chief guest, Honorable Justice B. N. Sri Krishna ji, who is joining us from London. Our guest of honors, instead of Mrs. Ava Shukla, we have Mrs. Bhoj. She is the Managing Director of MTDC and Maharashtra IT. Guest of honor, Mr. Anand Deshpande ji, Founder Chairman, Persistent Systems, and dignitaries, Lieutenant General J.S. Aluwalia, PVSM, President, Institute of Directors, Shri Sailesh Haribhakti, Chairman, Institute of Directors, Western Region, Shri Anand Mehrkar ji from Boston, USA, all the way at a very difficult time now because they stand 12 hours behind us. And our keynote speakers, our valued invitees, guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. Once again, hearty welcome to Institute of Directors virtual conference on Board's Perspective, the Promise and Perils of Data. We sincerely appreciate your huge global participation. Data, some people say, is fuel. Some people say it's food for. The only difference is a modern day food for the businesses to grow. And the only difference is that while food for human beings runs in short supplies, data is never in short supply. Data is in abundance. And so when we were talking about the theme for this conference with Shri Sailesh Haribhakti ji, he himself being a technology evangelist, he immediately endorsed the theme of conference on in favor of Board's Perspective, the Promise and Perils of Data, which is essentially data, whether it is an asset or liability. Before I invite Mr. Sailesh Haribhakti formally, kindly allow me to say a few words about him. We all know him as a renowned chartered accountant and board chair or most sought after independent director whose name appears in more than hundreds of companies' annual reports for his contributions in those companies. However, I would like to introduce him to you in his new avatar as a technology evangelist. A brilliant scholar who was throughout a gold medalist in academics, but now so much and so that for his love in technology that he has also authored a best-selling book called The Digital Performance. He has been contributing on technology platforms in more than one way. He leads many best boards as chairman or independent director, including Blue Star, L&T Finance, NSDL E-Governance, Times of India Group, Mahindra Life Spaces, Ambuja Cement, ACC, Bajaj Electricals, just to name the few. He has represented India on the Standards Advisory Council of International Accounting Standards Board and also contributes on various policy matters of Government of India through various platforms. He is highly dedicated to corporate governance and supports technology initiatives so wholeheartedly that everyone is his great fan on his talks about the future of boards and the role of technology in corporate governance in the times ahead. Over to you, Kailash Haribhakti sir. Please, we are all eager to listen to you.
Thank you very much, Vikesh Bhai. May I start with my very deep, humble, and fond salutations to Justice Sri Krishna. I had the singular privilege of serving on a board alongside him, and I know what wisdom, gravitas, and true wisdom he brings to any table that he sits around. Thank you very much for being with us, sir. I'm also extremely happy that we have Mr. Anand Deshpande with us, we have Mrs. Kosh, and we have Mr. Shrikant Sarda, who are all here with us this wonderful afternoon, morning, evening. So greetings to everybody on this call. Let me begin by sharing with you the data dilemma, which really is at the center of debate today. On the one hand, data can be immensely empowering. And we know that data about identity, data about location, and data about the activity that happens in physical spaces, when pulled together, when analyzed, becomes intelligence. And that intelligence is capable of powering decisions in a way that virtually we did not have access to. But data is of actually two types. One that arises outside the organization, and the other that arises and emerges within the organization. And let me deal with the internal data first to talk about the promise and perils of this data. The first and most important thing about data is that unless it is given a context, it simply does not make sense. And therefore, the context has to be on how that data was over the last few periods, few years. In some analytics, it goes over many, many years. What was planned versus what happened? And what is the best achievement in that interaction anywhere else in the world? And how is that data for the internal purpose compared to that in the context of that evaluation? Without that context, data begins to lose meaning. Let me give you a very powerful way in which data was deployed internally by an organization which works in rural India. And it was able to track and map the location of where the borrowers that they were lending to actually resided. They were able to map and track the individual identity of each of their borrowers in a very clean manner so that there was no doubt about that individual being the borrower. And there was continuous flowing data in the application which was made available to the people in the field on the interaction of that individual residing in that location with the company in terms of what was borrowed, when it was repaid, what were all the timelines for making it happen. And with this empowerment, the percentage of collection on due date, even post-COVID, very, very quickly after the first wave, it jumped up dramatically. But after the second wave, it jumped up to over 99% on-time collection, which would have been impossible without the benefit of that internal data, that was very assiduously collected and made available through the context of the application that was carried around by the people who were visiting each customer. And that has had a dramatic impact on improving the relationship with the customer and making sure that things got collected on time. And I'm sure that this kind of instance can be replicated in every one of our workspaces. Just the simple fact that people were persuaded that to come to work was safer than staying at home. And that was a absolutely data-led communication that led people to get that belief and have an assurance that they would remain safe while they were at the workplace. That's what got commerce going. That's what got livelihoods actually continue to prosper. And it's no small wonder that because of this wonderful availability of data, compute power has never been of the order that we have seen. Download speeds have been phenomenal across all the multiple usages and all the peaks. We've had systems which continue to function. And this has enabled the world to actually deal with COVID. That is the promise of data that has been fulfilled. And let me share with you that on every board, the one data that was tracked was this data about people, about testing, about verification, about making sure that they felt safe. They came, they were made to work in an environment that they felt safe in and were productive to the extent that they could be. No small wonder that many companies had their best ever performance because dedicated performance, which was data-led, was in. On the other hand, there is external data, which is of customers who are yet not your customer and instances that have not yet got a chance to interact with your enterprise. And that data, when it is multiplexed with the internal data, actually augments the intelligence of the organization and the people who are in decision making to make challenging forays into risk-based new avenues. And this multiplexing of external and internal data has given rise to a phenomenal quantum of new value and new productivity. And let me share with you what are the perils of this data. The biggest peril, and I remember Justice Sri Krishna so fondly because he made us aware of the risk of not conforming to privacy considerations of individuals. Just imagine what would happen if data about sensitive data about customers leaks out and simply becomes available to people who are not supposed to be looking at it. It is one of the gravest dangers that data carries with it inherently. The other big risk is of being attacked and taken away and analyzed for competitive intelligence and for destroying the substratum of your company. The cyber heists and the cyber attacks that we have seen heightened over the last few really point out the perils of data. But behind and beyond all of this lurks the amazing power that data as an influencer of people and their actions can have. We have seen what happens when fakes, both in terms of news and in terms of images, can drive people to absolutely different decisions than what they were planning to make. And that can affect outcomes of many political and social processes. And we saw the way in which political elections, the way in which product sales and everything can be influenced by this peril of data. And because data is now so ubiquitous, it has become incumbent upon all of us at a macro level, at a micro level, to protect it, to respect privacy, to make sure that the pipe through which the data moves is secure, is not hackable. And therefore, we are now beginning to deploy technologies such as the blockchain, which has become one of the most deployed across all applications technology, to make sure that you have a fighting chance to make sure that the perils of data are actually avoided. Data is empowering, is essential, is augmenting of intelligence, but at the same time, it needs to be protected to make sure that societal considerations do not overwhelm the use of data within an organization. And for boards, there is no bigger issue today than cybersecurity. Climate change, cybersecurity, both linked to actual data that has emerged and has delivered to boards what they need to track from a risk perspective. And therefore, this particular regional webinar on the board's perspective on the promise and perils of data could not have come at a more opportune time, when we are suffused with data, where we are every day hearing about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all the challenges of protecting the organization and protecting the privacy of people whose data we have as custodians. I'm extremely happy that we have such an extraordinary panel of people to enlighten us on the subject, and I will look forward to listening to everybody very carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Salishji. Thank you very much. And we have Dr. Anand Deshpande also having joined us. And also Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia is here with us. And we are now inviting Dr. Anand Deshpande, founder, chairman, and MD at Persistent Systems. Before we invite him, allow me to say a few words about him. Dr. Anand Deshpande is the founder, chairman, and managing director of Persistent Systems, one of the most loved companies in India, and is responsible for overall leadership at Persistence. He is a BTech honors from IIT Kharagpur, MS, and a PhD from Indiana University, USA, a true technology visionary with insights in next-gen technologies, ensuring that Persistent Systems stays at the forefront of technology and innovation. Dr. Deshpande has served numerous positions at various professional and non-profit organizations, that is NASSCOM, Executive Council, ACM, India, where he was the first president, SEEP, Pune chapter, CSI, CII's Pune Zonal Council trustee, and in the Computer History Museum, Dean's Advisory Council in the School of Informatics, Computing and Engineering of Indiana University, and a member of the Executive Committee of MCCIA. Currently, he serves as a trustee at VLDB Endowment. At personal level, he has also established the Asra Foundation, a non-profit entity with focus on creating self-employment at scale. He is currently working with Niti Aayog, a government think tank, on women's entrepreneurship portal as well. These activities on Dr. Deshpande spot on Forbes Asia's Heroes of Philanthropy list in 2018. May I kindly request on behalf of the audience to kindly have the address, inaugural address from Dr. Deshpande. please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. Honorable Justice Shri Krishna, Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, Lieutenant General Aluwalia, and several other dignitaries who are present for this event. It's my honor and privilege to be here at this session. Normally, I'm a techie at hand, and I tend to do a lot of work in data for the last almost 35 years now. And I have not had a chance to really talk to directors about what they should do with data. So it got me thinking about asking a slightly different question on the context of data. So I sort of decided it would be a good idea for me to share with you 5 questions that every director must ask their company in terms of their data strategy, and then 5 questions that the company must ask in the context of readiness for this data risks. So that's really the structure of how I want to share my thoughts today. Let me start with the 5 ideas that I thought directors should ask companies about data strategies. And I do realize that in this audience, we have directors who are representing many different kinds of companies and all kinds of different industries. So I don't want to necessarily be very specific about an industry. But in 2011, one of the very prophetic articles that came out was by Mark Andreessen, who said that software is eating the world and every business is starting to getting transformed and is getting eaten by software. But I would say further that it's not just the software that is eating the world. It is the data that is created by software and the data that's being managed by software. That is what is making the difference to the world. And in that context, I wanted to say that the first question that companies should look at and ask themselves or their companies is to check if the business models that their companies are working on, can they be somehow transformed to be data-driven businesses? And the difference that you can make if you are seen as a data-driven business as compared to just an ordinary business can be very significant. And there are many examples, including, let's say, Compass, which got public recently, which is really a real estate company, but they converted themselves to be a data-driven business. And all of a sudden, their valuation was tremendously jumped up. I'll give you one example of one of our customers for whom we had worked for many years, almost 10 years or so. And this company was focused on building a ERP type system for healthcare practices. And because healthcare practices who have this kind of inventory are very few, we ended up working with a lot of chemotherapy clinics who tend to do daycare and hence carry a lot of inventory of expensive drugs. So one of the things that we realized was that we were providing a system for companies to manage their ERP and other things. And we had a very small team, very small company. And we have been working with these people for 10, 15 years and building out this system where we are collecting all this data for people who are running chemotherapy clinics. Of course, as technology evolved, a lot of this stuff was happening on the web, and we were running a software as a service kind of a model for allowing people to do this. And very soon we realized that because of the data that we had for the companies and all of the other places and all the companies who were chemotherapy centers, we were able to predict very clearly how much money a company would get as reimbursements for their insurance. So instead of selling the ERP, this company decided that instead of selling the ERP as a service, I will try to give you a yes/no answer on when a patient walks in, the system will be able to provide you how much money the company will be able to charge from insurance companies for providing service for that patient. Now, you can charge only so much money for the ERP product, but when you provide this as a service, where you're providing denial of information and other bunch of things that we were providing, the value added was very significant. And this really helped them in sort of transforming their business from instead of being an ERP product, they became an analytics and insights company for helping businesses such as these chemotherapy clinics to understand and optimize their value proposition for customers. And the value benefit that they had was they got acquired once and then twice, and eventually this company got sold for almost $800 million because they had amazing information that no single pharmaceutical company or a clinic or any of these people had. So again, it was a fairly simple technology transformation, but the business model transformation and perception was really changed to make the business be a data-driven business. And there are many such examples of places where we have seen this transformation. And if you're looking at building a company and your company has the ability to convert themselves to be a data-driven company, which has data strategy as a big part of it, then of course that is a good place to go. Shailesh already mentioned about internal and external data. This was one example of how a business model can be changed using data. The second item that I want to mention, or the second question that I think directors should ask is, how can we leverage the data from our own business to optimize the efficiency of our business? And a very nice example was shared by Shailesh, but we have seen this happen across multiple different businesses in the work that we do as well. In the last few years, one of the questions that, I'll just give you a context, we run about 600 to 700 projects as Persistent at the same time. And when we are running these projects, typically people collect all kinds of data and try to understand that. But when we started to ask this question is that, can you tell me which projects are going to be in trouble 2 weeks from now? That completely changed how we looked at our data and the value addition that we were trying to get. So one of the important things to think about is to see that, okay, do we have signals and other areas that we are collecting from within the organization, and that can help us improve the efficiency and output that we provide for our customers? So that was the number 2 question that I think board members can spend some time asking the company, saying, hey, what kind of data are you collecting? Are you able to improve the efficiency and actually measure what data you have? The third item that I want to mention is related but slightly different. And this is related to the fact that we want to build a data-driven culture in the organization. So the question is that boards typically, and I've seen this happen at Persistent and other places also, in general, people tend to start off by sort of giving, sort of this sort of informal commentary about activities. They're saying things because of perception and feelings, but reality is not always what is perceived. And the reality only comes when you have the right kind of data and you are able to drive this across the entire organization. So what we have seen happen within the company is that when you provide clear goals and objectives, and you are able to create data sets that let you reflect on your goals and objectives, and these data sets are available to all employees or all stakeholders, then everyone in the project or everyone in the team gets an opportunity to define what is right for them and measure how they are doing against this. And then meetings are not about how I feel about this or whatever else, but then they come down to saying, here's the data and now let's react to it. And this becomes very important when you look at performance appraisals or any other item that you might want to do. Now, unfortunately, this is not as easy as you might think. This takes a lot of work to do, but it is a step in the right direction. And as board members, I think we should be asking companies on how to be better data-driven and create a data-driven culture within the organization. The fourth thing I want to mention is the fact that, and this was sort of referred to by Shailesh as well, that machine learning and artificial intelligence is transforming the way we look at businesses. I sincerely believe that the next generation of transformations are going to be driven by data and insights to help people make better decisions. So one of the important aspects of being able to do machine learning or to do data science is to have the right quality of data in your organization. Now, again, here, setting up the data infrastructure, whether it's setting up the right kind of connectors to collect data from different sources, internal, external, and also IoT type sources which are generating data all the time, bringing it all together in a format that can be manipulated, such as potentially a data lake or some other forms of this thing, and then setting up an API architecture so that you can pull the data when you need it, as you need it. This requires a lot of planning and effort. And I would encourage boards to ask the companies about their readiness to create the necessary data structure and the data efficient pipelines so that they are positioning themselves well for a machine learning based organization that would be necessary in the future. And the last thing that I want to mention, and this fifth item that I wanted to mention, was that board members should spend time to ensure that companies have well-trained executives and capable team members who understand database set businesses so that they can run their business strategy effectively. So it's nice to talk about data, but when you have large volumes of data and you have to manage it, it is not as trivial as it might seem, and it takes a lot of work to do this. And we have Anand Mahurkar here, who runs a very interesting company as well. And there are many other companies that are there who have spent their lifetime in trying to make sure that data is available but can be used when needed. So I think this is a big part of how we want to use data. So let me just summarize by restating the 5 questions that I talked about. So of course, the first was that, is it possible to transform our business to be a data-driven business or a data-centric business, which might help in improving the valuation of the company and essentially change the way the world looks at you. The second part was, can we leverage data from our business to improve and optimize the efficiency of our business? How can we build a data-driven culture within the organization? Can we set up the right data infrastructure and an efficient pipeline so that you are able to do machine learning and analytics and AI against your data set? And finally, do we have a well-trained and capable team to lead our data transformations? Now, let me get to the perils. Clearly, when you have all these data sets with you, it also creates a set of challenges. So one of the most well talked about challenges these days have been relating to data breaches and ransomware, malware, phishing, denial of service, and a whole bunch of malicious activities that have become rather commonplace. Unfortunately, any challenge or problem in these kinds of areas is a huge cost, expense, and also, more importantly, a very high reputational risk. So as board members, I think it is important for you to ensure that companies that you are on the boards of have well-defined and established processes in place for data protection. And this is the first and the most important thing, that you must ensure that, hey, does the company have well-defined systems and processes for data, for managing the data that is collected, whether it is internal data, external data, or any other data that they are collecting by buying from different people. And do we understand what kind of data we have and how do we deal with it? The second question I would ask and when I'm on the board is that, yes, do you have a plan to protect against a data breach? Yes, that is important. Many companies would already have that. But then the other thing is, irrespective of your best plans, that doesn't guarantee that you would not have a data breach. So one of the questions I would ask in the board is to say that, do you have a plan? Should you have a data breach, then do you have a plan to deal with it? How would you go about it? Who would you respond to? Do you have a contingency plan that is well chalked out? Who are you going to call? Who should you wake up at what point? How is this going to be distributed or shared? So there is a whole bunch of things. And many of the companies that you may be working with may have contractual obligations about you requiring to share this information very quickly. So this is something that you don't want to find out when you have a breach. You have to have a plan and ready in a form that can be executed, and hope through your systems and processes that you never have to execute it. But having the plan is essential. Number 3 that I would mention, and this was again mentioned by Shaileshji, and we also have Justice here, Justice Sri Krishna, who talks about this quite a bit, is relating to data privacy. So one of the questions that people need to ask on the boards is to say that, what kind of personal identifiable information is being held by the company? Is it necessary for the business? Do we really need to hold it? Is it possible for us to get our job done using de-identified or not having this personal information? Is there some way to handle this effectively? And do we have a policy that can articulate exactly how we use this data? How is privacy preserved? If someone were to request that their data not be used, such as a GDPR or any of those kinds of things, how do we hold that and get that to work together? I've been on the board for Aadhaar now for the last 5 years, and one of those examples is the Aadhaar data set that you might be hosting. So if you have people's Aadhaar numbers and cards, then you have to treat them with a level of security, and the policies need to support that. So number 3, I mentioned data and machine learning being very related. One of the things that is not talked about a whole lot, but I think I'm quite passionate about, and I would like to point out, and I would, as a board member, I would ask companies that I'm on that dealing with is that, yes, you're starting to use your data for machine learning and for algorithms to use this data for building models and various other things. But how about biases? Our data is likely to be biased. We might be creating a whole set of perceptions about the data sets that we have from our past. And we may be discriminating against uh, groups of people on the basis of gender or age or various other things. And a lot of our machine learning algorithms are going to learn from our data, which is already biased. So one has to really think very hard that, while you're saying that I'm going to build my system on the basis of data, you have to make sure that you are tweaking your systems to ensure that sort of the data biases that are there do not spread into the machines that we build out, because if they go too far, then there would be no way to come back. And this is a topic that is not discussed a whole lot at the moment, especially in India, but I would definitely, as a board member, ask this question about biases and how things are working out on this one. And the last thing I would mention is, again, while I talked about the importance of having teams that understand data for the promise side, it's equally important to train teams and individuals to understand the importance of data privacy and data protection. Because after all, at the end of it, it's all about the individuals who are on the project who are making these decisions. And if they are not well trained, the company may have a policy, but the weakest link can be the individual on the project who leaks something that he just didn't realize he was supposed to not do. See, despite good intentions, you could get into trouble. Let me summarize by just stating these 5 readiness risks that I pointed out. First being that, do we have well-established systems in place for data protection? And I'm referring to systems here. In the second part, I would say that, yes, you want to protect against data breaches and other challenges. But in case there is a data breach, are you ready to handle it? And you cannot ever assume that you will have process and systems that will give you 100% coverage. So you have to be ready with this. The third point is, are you hosting personal identifiable information? Do you really need to have it? And if you have it, do you have a policy to ensure that data privacy is being managed for all the people that you're hosting information for? The fourth item I talked about was regarding handling bias in data. And there are lots of challenges that come in when you start to build out data models based on data sets that you have. And our data is hugely biased. So we have to think through this a little bit carefully before assuming that every algorithm that we built is ready for production. And finally, at the end of it, we are dependent on the teams of people who do the work. So it is important as a board member to inquire within the companies to ensure that the teams are well trained and understand the importance, not just about the benefits of data, but also the perils and protections and privacy requirements that are needed. I will stop here and I'll be happy to answer any questions over email or otherwise. My email address is anand@persistent.com. I know we don't have time for Q&A right now, so I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, sir. We are really grateful to you for your valuable time, and it's really a pleasure and honor for all the participants also to enjoy your talk. And these 5 questions that you have put up are really very, very valuable to guide the boards, and boards have to be prepared for the data challenge. A lot of work is being done at the ground level, but at board level, a lot has to be done. We have now got with us Mrs. Jayashree Bhoj. She has also joined us, and I would like to invite her to share her vision. Mrs. Jayashree Bhoj is IAS officer of 2003 batch and has had a very, very distinguished career in the services, and she has served the state of Maharashtra in her many roles and many capacities, setting precedents and doing innovative things there. Currently, she is the managing director of MTDC, and also she is the managing director with a huge responsibility of Maharashtra IT, that is Maharashtra Information and Technology Corporation Limited. She brings rich and very first-hand experience of how she is advising the government on handling data. Government has a huge challenge because government uses maximum data and it holds huge responsibility as well. So may I request Mrs. Jayashree Bhoj, ma'am, I'm really grateful to you for joining us at a short notice, and we are really very grateful. We are very happy to have you with us because you are actually heading all the data activities and IT activities in Maharashtra. Kindly give your words of wisdom and share with the
Good
audience.
afternoon, everybody. Respected panelists, this is a great pleasure to be on board today and to be discussing about the importance and the perils of data. As you all know and would definitely agree with me, information is power these days. And as a government agency, Maharashtra IT Corporation is a fully owned government public sector company. So as a government agency, we have been in this, in the collection of data, in the usage of data, we do all the while, and we have been doing a lot of schemes for the government, implementing a lot of schemes. So at this particular juncture, I would like to make a mention that how important we find that data is. If you look at the government sector as such, from the time a person is born, like getting his birth certificate, till his death, till his grave, cradle to the grave, till the death, we have government is involved and keeps on generating lot of data. Now, many of these data are most essential for a human being during the various aspects. But however, whenever a state government, as a government agency, when we have to implement a lot of schemes, when we have to plan a lot of schemes, we always find that data is available, but it's available in bits and pieces. So every time the government has to devise a new program or devise a new scheme, what we do is right from the beginning, from the start, we start collecting the data. We use it for that particular scheme. And after that, we do not use it. We use it till whatever the purpose is, and then we discard it. And like this, if we keep on seeing how many times different departments across different departments in the government, we see that a lot of times we keep generating data, we keep using it, but we do not try to collate this data. So every time a scheme is envisaged, we find that we have to do this process right from the scratch to the end. That's how Maharashtra government has now decided to have a unified database, citizen data hub to be created so that it will help in the digital delivery of services. So here we find that a lot of times the data which are collected in the different departments can be used. It is of great help to many other departments as well. So we are going to, we want that, knowing the importance of the data, we want to create a data hub as such, and then create a golden data of every citizen. So that whenever we want to implement a scheme, we can identify the beneficiaries properly, and these multiple databases can also help in actually using the data and delivering benefits in a great manner, in a targeted, so that the beneficiary gets the data. We also right now everybody is shifting towards the direct beneficiary transfer. So here the data becomes all the more necessary, that a person's data is with us, but at the same time, it is also the responsibility of the government to ensure that the protection of this data is as well there. We cannot be quite negligent towards this data which we are having. We have the Aadhaar data, we collect Aadhaar data many times. So all said and done, we have to align our policies with the requirements of the data protection, which is coming up. Then we also have to encourage adoption of privacy of the citizens. Then at various instances, take the citizens' consent as well. So I would like to conclude by saying that data is very necessary, but at the same time, having the great data source, the data bank also puts additional responsibility on the government, that we have to see to it that it is protected, the data is not shared, and other antisocial elements or unknown without the citizens' consent, it should be shared, can be shared with others. So I think data is both useful as the topic goes, as well as it is very important that it has to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We sincerely appreciate your time, and at such a short notice today is really a very hectic day in the Maharashtra administration, and at a moment like this to find time for us is really very, very kind of you. We sincerely appreciate. Now we have with us Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia ji, the President of IOD, and before I request him to formally welcome our chief guest once again, allow me to say a few words about Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia, who has had a very distinguished career in the armed services and now in the corporate governance service to the nation. Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia, PVSM, retired, is the president of Institute of Directors and of World Environment Foundation. A postgraduate in electronics engineering and an MBA, he had specialized in engineering support to weapon systems of the Army. He has undergone extensive training in various defense manufacturing organizations in France, UK, Russia, and Japan. He is a chartered engineer and a fellow member of large number of foreign and Indian professional engineering and management institutions. He has been the chairman of Institution of Engineers and president of Daily Management Association, and also chairman of Safety and Quality Forum by Institution of Engineers. What is most significant is his contribution of over 3 decades in promoting corporate governance and building tomorrow's boards in the country. It is really unparalleled in the country. Over to Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia, sir. Please.
Thank you, Vikesh. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I must welcome Honorable Justice B.N. Shri Krishna, Sri Sailesh Haribhakti ji, and Dr. Anand Deshmukh. And we have had really excellent talks till now. We have heard everyone and talk about. In fact, I was asked to just introduce the subject today, but I think there is no introduction. The subject has already been said in such detail as to why it is really material for board by our Sailesh Haribhakti ji, the chairman of the IOD in Western region. And we have had also an excellent talk by Dr. Anand Deshpande, who spoke extremely well on detailing of how data, what kind of data is really required and what are the problems and how it is important. Of course, the Bombay, our lady, she then went into the life of a data, how a human being, the data is required right from the date of birth to the date of death and all that, and how all that is valid. So this really covers various aspects of data. But today, I'll just say a few words about IOD before that is not what really has been said much, but let me just say IOD basically is a membership-driven, not-for-profit, an apex organization of corporate directors in India. It was set up on 12th of July 1990, that is nearly 30 years, 31 years now, and it is responsible basically for training and updating of corporate directors, including independent and women, I mean, any type of directors, networking of directors through national and international conventions, which we have been having annually in London, in Dubai, in Singapore and all. Also, we have a board research and advisory service for the corporates, wherein annual annual review, performance review of the board, performance review of the directors, including independent directors, etc., are all managed. We especially also have IOD publications and handbooks and periodicals, which are specially for the directors, and really the only organization preparing such things for the corporate directors. This is projecting Indian directors' views to the government and media. That is, we represent the directors with the government and media. And another important area which Vikesh mentioned is preparing for the future ready boards. How do we prepare future ready boards, and how do we prepare board ready directors? Because that is what is providing you the independent directors and the independent directors of future. We know more than 50% of the directors now are really going to be in a board are independent directors. And as such, this is also a very, very important task that we are doing. Now, boards, we keep examining the requirement of future boards, what should be an effective future board like, what it should be doing, what should its directors be, what processes are required, what is happening in the rest of the world, and what we can do. So this is what we keep collecting, keep trying to analyze, and keep carrying out surveys in India also to see what really is effective, what really is required for us, and how we can provide this service to the board and the directors for which the Institute of Directors exists. In this now, I am very glad that the Bombay office has taken up a subject which is not very common, which is not because we keep remaining involved in so many other aspects of the functioning of the board, that requirement of data and importance of data for the board was not much handled. So I am thankful to both Sailesh Haribhakti ji and Vikesh Walia for really organizing and specially focusing in this very, very vital aspect. You see, the data today, even when you read any of the even political, what to talk of business, we are talking of data analytics. Data analytics has become a profession. This is another job as to how data is to be collected, collated, analyzed, how it has to be standardized, how it has to be maintained, how its privacy is to be managed. So there are various aspects on which data really has to be managed properly and be able to use. Otherwise, we will not be able to function effectively. So we have to understand the data and see how best we can utilize it. And it is a vital for all of us, especially the board. That is what really is important. So with such a galaxy of experts on data and data analytics we have there, I would just leave it to them and love to hear them and learn more about how our boards should be managing data and how we need to incorporate data more so in our training and other functional activities. Thank you very much, Vikesh. Thank you for it.
Thank you very much, sir. Very inspiring words. It really gladdens all of us. Your blessings and your good wishes always drive us to do more on this front. Thank you very much. And now it's time to welcome our chief guest, Honorable Justice Sri Krishna ji. He has had many responsibilities, and one of the most significant has been the chairman of Data Protection Committee. Honorable Justice B.N. Sri Krishna started his career as an advocate in Bombay High Court in 1962 and later served as judge of the Bombay High Court from 1990 till 2001. When he was appointed the Chief Justice of High Court of Kerala, he was appointed as a judge of the Supreme Court in 2002 and served until his retirement in 2006. Apart from being one-man commission to inquire into Mumbai communal rights, Justice Sri Krishna has headed several high-profile commissions, such as the 6th Pay Commission, the Committee of Bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh, Financial Sector Legislative Reform Commission, the Expert Committee on Arbitration in India, Committee on Data Protection Framework. Justice Sri Krishna is currently the Vice President and a trustee of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan and trustee at the India International Center as well. In the past, he has been an independent director of National Stock Exchange of India and also a director on the board of NSDL, E-Governance Infrastructure, and National Securities Depository Limited. So he has an exceptional mix of corporate and judiciary at the highest level in this country, and his familiarity with the capital markets also comes in handy for choosing him to committees related to finance and businesses, where his contribution has been significant and huge, and we continue to look forward to his guidance in these areas and many more. Over to Honorable Justice B.N. Sri Krishna ji. Sir, please give us your words of wisdom. We are all looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you, Vikesh. Mr. Vikesh Walia, my dear friend Shailesh Haribhakti, Mr. Anandesh Pandey, Ms. Bhoj, Lieutenant General Aluwalia, and all the persons spearheading this Institute of Directors, and all the technical experts who are gathered around to make this function and this event a success. My greetings to you all. Since I'm in London, I would have said good morning, but I'm afraid that it must be the evening there. Wherever you are, my greetings to you. For in the next 10 minutes, I shall concisely say what I need to say in this matter, since a lot of it has already been said by the learned speakers who preceded me, and a lot of it is going to be said in the technical sessions which are to follow. Human inventiveness has given a turn to humanity from time to time. The invention of the wheel was the first turn when there was a progress. From the caveman, we became somebody who knew how to run a cart at least. Then came James Watt with his steam engine, which led to the Industrial Revolution all over Europe and England. Then we came to radio invention by Marconi, which revolutionized communication. And of course, we have internet, which has really revolutionized communication in a manner that keeps changing from hour to hour. In all this process, what is important is, what is it that they are building upon? Interestingly, till now, let's say till a decade ago, nobody really bothered about the brick blocks on which man was inventing things. Data is nothing but a building block. Now, a building block is useless unless somebody can organize it in some good pattern so that it can produce an edifice which is of worth. So you have whether you have the Babylonian Garden and the Taj Mahal, or the Tower of London, or the Rajabhai Tower in Mumbai, the brain that has gone behind it is equally material. Now, while we appreciate the intellectual prowess of the human being, which organizes bits of data into patterns so that we can draw conclusions from them or utilize it for any other purpose, we must also recognize that data is an empowering factor. It is, even though we did not say it formally, how would you do it? If somebody came to you to work as a maid in your house, or a servant, as a driver in your organization, you would ask him a couple of questions and say, how many times have you been convicted? How many times have you exceeded the speed limit and got challenged for it? Or how many times have you had this problem or that problem? What are you doing? You are just eliciting the data from him, so that by analyzing it mentally, you come to a conclusion and say, hey, this person is a good employee and a bad employee, whether he should be engaged or not. Now we have a whole lot of credit corporations, Chrysler and others. What do? They look at the pattern of your spending, the pattern of your income, the pattern of your indebtedness, the pattern of your inability to meet with the servicing of the debts, and then draw a conclusion that you are either credit worthy or you are not credit worthy. This is exactly what the entire concept of data analytics is. But in all this, the most important factor, in fact, as I always say, is this is like a triangle. At the apex is a citizen whose data you are playing with. He must be empowered. He has the power of saying yes or no to you. Then on one side is the state, which is equally interested in his data, as Ms. Bhoj told us. And finally, at the third apex is the e-commerce trade business, which is also playing with the data. Now, in all this, as a board, in fact, I've been on the board, as I pointed out to Mr. Vikesh, and I've had the privilege of being on this board of companies where Perils was also a director. We look at, what do we look at? We look at data for the purpose of planning our future, planning our business strategies, planning our financial strategies. But at the same time, we also must look at what are we doing with this data? Are we giving this enough privacy which is needed because we are taking this data from somebody else? That is exactly the issue that was decided by the Supreme Court way back when the whole debate started in this country in the Justice Puttaswamy case. The Supreme Court said, hey, this is your fundamental right of a human being, and you cannot take it away unless you are subjected to various restrictions. That is why when you sit on the board, in fact, in the concept of data management, what is known as privacy by design. So this is a concept must trickle down right from the board members to the last person who deals with the data. That, hey, we are taking the data of human beings. What are we doing with it? Are we maintaining it in such manner that it does not cause harm to the human being? So that is important. So this privacy by design is a concept that must percolate and widespread amongst all the company officials, particularly so among the board members. Now, why is it necessary? Data is, for example, if you have water is a good source of energy, good source of power. But you have huge water reservoirs. What is the first thing that you do? You ensure that there is no breach. Otherwise, you will have this disastrous consequences of flooding out people and killing people. Similarly with electricity, storage, similarly with nuclear power. Therefore, first and foremost is that you must handle it in a view that this is somebody else's right, and we must give it according its necessary priority. Number two, ensure that you are handling it in a manner that there is no breach or leakage which will cause damage to the person whose data you have taken away. And if that is done, then you are in a position to say that I can use the data, use my analytical faculties, use your machine learning, IoT, big data, and all that, and come out with strategies that will be good for the company, strategies that will be good for your CSR, strategies that will ultimately benefit the society in which the company is operating. Now, this is exactly the issue which must be carefully looked at. Now, of course, a lot of this talk today is without knowing what the writing on the wall is going to be. We all today do not know what is the law that is going to be passed, because fortunately or unfortunately, this law has been far too delayed. For more than 3.5 years, the thing has been hanging fire. Now, as and when the law comes into play, then the law will look at the various issues and put them in proper perspective. And it will be necessary at that time, as every board member, every corporate executive, to ensure that this concept of data by design is oriented in order to make sure that there is compliance. Now, I remember as a director in a company, we would have issues like, of course, in the NSDL, we had big issues about data and all that security, cyber security. But in an ordinary company, there will be a chief fire officer whose job is to make sure that there is no fire at all. But nobody can give you a 100% guarantee against fire. So there should be alternative strategies, as rightly pointed out by Mr. Deshpande. So what do you do in an emergency? You should have a fire escape, you should have firefighting equipment, you should have immediate access. All these have to be worked out. Similarly, with data, with companies resorting to collection of more and more data, the concept of leakage internally or by reason of machine failure or by reason of external mischief must be carefully looked at, and then only the data can be preserved and in a manner that is satisfactorily used and analyzed for your benefit and somebody else's benefit. One more issue is mere leakage is not the only issue. Corruption of data. Now take for example, in most of the government concerns, at least my personal experience is, you spell your name in a particular manner, you give your age, but in the ration card comes, you are shown as something, some nonsensical thing, your gender is changed, your age is changed, everything is changed. Now that is corruption of data. Corruption of data is something that must be prevented. Data's integrity must be warranted, must be carefully preserved by the companies which collect data. Otherwise, they are doing a disservice to the person whose data you are collecting. And finally, in all your strategies, always the question is the government as a state entitled to take away your data, which may be your data generated by you or the data collected by you from your customers and employees and others with whom you deal? To what extent are they entitled to take it away from you? Under what circumstances, without your consent or without the consent of your customers, is a big issue that can only be answered when the contours of the law are clearly laid out. Now, with these strategies, the board can always look at least make sure that the house is in proper order, make sure that whatever data you collect is somebody else's data. So you must treat it like a trustee with some kind of responsibility, with some kind of fidelity. Now, that is the strategy that the board should adopt. And of course, the ultimate reason for all boards to exist is to ensure. Now, we are talking of today in terms of ESG. Now, E is environmental protection, S is societal responsibility, and G is the governance. The governance is with regard to your own administration, with regard to how you deal with your employees, how you deal with the customers. In all these aspects, data plays a big role for environmental protection, for corporate social responsibility, and for governance. Data, when used carefully, data, when analyzed intelligently, without any bias, as rightly pointed out by Dr. Deshpande, is the one that will empower you. And the data revolution is going to really help the country, empower the citizens, empower everybody across the board, and probably reach to that cake, help us in reaching that goal, when we can proudly say that we are the. In fact, today I'm very happy to say this. I've been invited to several international seminars outside the world, and everybody is saying, hey, your data bill is very good, we must try to adopt it. In Southeast Asia, even in Europe, I was invited by the European Commission people, and they were very happy that we were able to produce something of a model which everybody can look at and admire. Now, I hope that we'll be able to carry on with this, and with the technological inventions that we have with in fact, I would even go one step ahead and say, if necessary, protect the data by using quantum mechanical models, which will help you in making it foolproof. If all that is done, data is good. Otherwise, data is somebody's property. Actually, it's not property in a technical sense, somebody else's right that you have borrowed, and you cannot use it without betraying such person's interest. Thank you very much for inviting me. I would have loved to continue with this, to participate in the further proceedings, but I have something else lined up for today's in London. So with this, I take your leave. Wish the best success for all your technical sessions, and hope to interact more with you and understand a whole lot of the problems that get thrown out when these kinds of discussions take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We are really grateful to you. I'll request Salesh Haribhakti ji to kindly give us some
way beyond
thanks
time, and I don't want to hold back Justice Sri Krishna. He has another engagement, but I just want to re-emphasize 4 or 5 words that we have heard through this whole session. And I go back to Justice's wonderful phrase of privacy by design and patterns that emerge from data and create insight. and create value and empower decision making. It was amazing to listen to Anand outline the 5 questions and the 5 concerns. Wonderful to listen to Ms. Bhoj on how government is so sensitive to data. And I think that is that mindset of being sensitive to privacy, sensitive to making sure that what is in your custody as a trustee, you treat it with the respect that it deserves. And it was absolutely amazing to listen to Justice expound on why our privacy law, whenever it comes, and I hope it comes soon, will be a benchmark for the whole world. What a fantastic start to this wonderful webinar. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Ms. Bhoj. It has been a delight to listen to everybody. And what can I say, Justice Ahluwalia, your presence is always a great inspiration. And Vikesh, I leave it to you to carry forward the next few sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have 2 very, very interesting sessions. First one headed by Dr. Anand Mahurkar. And before we start, thank you very much, sir, everyone. And before we start, I would request Ravi to play the videos of our sponsors. And Ravi.
When you're a certified management accountant, CEOs will do whatever it takes to get you on their team.
I want to hire you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, Ravi, for playing these videos of our sponsors. We are really thankful to Findability Sciences and to IMA and to Bombay Stock Exchange for supporting our day and the program today. And now is the time for commencing our plenary sessions. And we are not much out of the time. This time was scheduled to be at 4:20, and we are exactly at 4:22. So, Mr. Anand Mahurkar, sir, we are well in time for your session. I know you are joining us all the way from Boston, and it must be early morning, maybe about 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning in Boston. Thank you so much, and very kind of you to be joining us. And this is a panel discussion on our sub-theme called Harnessing the Era of Abundant Data for Building a Sustainable Competitive Advantage. Data is a huge elephant, and people always wonder what is what. And therefore, sometimes there is a confusion, it's a threat, it's an advantage. But people who have the vision, they can see the advantage out of the biggest crisis also. So here we are going to be listening to harnessing the era of abundant data for building a sustainable competitive advantage. And for this, we have got a very fine panel comprising of Mr. Anand Mahurkar, Mr. Sachin Kulkarni, and Ms. Amrita Mahendru. We are going to be having Mr. Anand Mahurkar. He has kindly consented to be the chair for this session, and we are going to get the benefit of his vision in leading this panel discussion and also summarizing it for us. So before we start, allow me to introduce Mr. Anand Mahurkar, who has been leading a very, very innovative and fine organization called Findability Sciences as founder and its CEO. Findability Sciences is a global provider of enterprise artificial intelligence solutions for digital transformation. Mr. Anand Mahurkar is the big data and artificial intelligence technology innovator who believes in driving business impact through strategic AI adoption. In 2010, he founded Findability Sciences with the vision to equip enterprises with the ability to find information. That's a huge challenge because organizations are always suffering and wanting to know how to get to what they want to know. In 2017, Mr. Anand Mahurkar led the company into Series A funding by SoftBank and also joined venture with SoftBank to address the Japan market, one of the first and few Indian origin companies to enter into Japan. Anand has led Findability Sciences on a path of technological innovation and growth, winning several awards in the world over. In 2021, Financial Times recognized Findability Sciences as one of the fastest growing companies in the US in 2021. INC magazine named Findability Sciences as being amongst the fastest growing American private companies in 2020. Fast Company also recognized Findability Sciences for its world-changing ideas, special mentions in 2021. He's going to be chairing the session, and we have two very fine persons from IT industry giving him company in the panel discussion. First is Mr. Sachin Kulkarni, Senior Vice President, Fiserv. Sachin has 28 years of global experience building sustainable businesses, bringing together consulting, technology, and outsourcing. He has delivered complex transformation programs while working across culturally diverse teams within retail, commercial, banking, payments, wealth management, regulatory compliances, and general insurance domains. Whatever these names, it only means data, data, and more data. At five services, global services, Sachin leads delivery and transformation across the portfolio, including card services, bank and credit union solution, open solution, bill payment, digital payment solutions, which all these are again nothing but data. His last role was with IBM as a global managing partner, where he led strategy, offering, and sales growth operations and third-party relationships globally for IBM's GCC clients. Before this, Sachin worked in leadership roles at Capgemini, Tech Mahindra, Atos, Syntel. He brings huge, outstanding record of managing delivery teams across Asia, Europe, and America. He has been awarded for his contribution to growth, productivity, automation, and excellence in sales. Brings very, very rich and practical experience. I'm confident he's going to contribute a lot in today's discussion. And second panelist with Mr. Mahurkar is going to be Mrs. Namrata Mahendru, Chief Digital Officer at Aditya Birla Group company in the CFI sector. Namrata is a senior strategic executive with CXO level success in leading organizations transform their businesses leveraging digital and technology. Currently, she is the Chief Digital Officer at Aditya Birla Group CFI sector and an award-winning digital transformation thought leader and practitioner. Namrita's forte lies in creating competitive advantages for organizations, redefining business models, reimagining consumer experiences, re-engineering business processes, building people capabilities, and orchestrating shifts in organization culture. All this is nothing but data. Every point that she is talking about is managing data in all these domains. A true technology evangelist, Namrita is deeply committed to building data-driven organizations, fostering a data and analytics culture, defining data, AI ethics, policy, governance, predicting, mitigating data privacy, and security risk, enabling data-based value creations. Namrita is a certified independent board director and a startup mentor, and also has life and leadership transformation coach. She advises, mentors, and coaches board members and CXOs, etc. Every point of time, she deals with huge data, how she handles, what she does with it, how she finds it to be of competitive advantage. I think Mr. Anand Mahurkar will have very good company with Sachin and Namrita, and the audience is going to love it. Please, Anandji, kindly.
Mr. Walia, I hope you can
Sir.
hear me well.
Very well, very well, very well. Perfect.
So, though you said that it's very early morning, I'm wide awake with listening to Justice Sri Krishna, Anand Deshpande, and Mr. Hari Bhakti. It was really very interesting to hear them. I have met them in different forums, but getting together in a digital forum on a world stage was very interesting. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon for all those who are joining. As Mr. Walia said, I'm joining you early morning from Boston, where I live and work for last 17 years. Sachin and Namrita, thank you for joining this panel. The way we are going to do this is Mr. Walia has requested me to share with you all my experience of what really big data and AI brings benefits to businesses. So I'm going to spend a few minutes and I know I have addressed number of board directors worldwide, probably in thousands, but this is the first time I'm really addressing to such a august group of board members from India. And I know that, again, just listening to the presentations in the first session, everybody is very well aware and educated on this topic, and this is probably the biggest topic today in the businesses about data and AI and use of machine learning, etc. But I want to share with you some of my experiences in terms of how big data and AI is being benefited. Followed by that, I'm going to request Sachin and Namrita consecutively to share their experiences about benefits of big data and AI. And we are going to take questions because three of us come as a practitioners from different areas. We have been in data and machine learning and AI business for decades. Therefore, anybody on the audience, you can either text a message. I think that's the best way so that we don't get any interference in the session. And I will try to moderate as many as questions in next 40 minutes we have. So on that introduction, I'm going to do a little change from the sessions we had so far, is that I'm going to actually share some visuals and not just have a talk. So let me see if you all can see my desktop. Hey, so I live in Boston, as you heard. And very interestingly, when I moved to Massachusetts in the United States, about a decade ago, I learned very interesting thing, that this is a Mayflower ship, which you may be aware in the history, that this first came to the shores of Massachusetts, and there were the pilgrims from Europe started coming to United States. But there is a very interesting fact, which is not very noted worldwide, is that the native Indians or Native Americans who were here in the United States, when they were seeing this boat coming, they actually couldn't see the boat, but they just saw people floating on the water. And why? Because again, as a human brain or human body, you can see only what is in your memory. And again, memory is a topic we can go on hours, because I'm not just talking about memory in your brain, but there are multiple levels of memories the human body has. So unless we have something in memory, we cannot see it. And that was such a fascinating learning for me, to just imagine that the native Indians or Americans standing on the shores of Massachusetts and looking at these boats coming in from Europe, and they were able to just see the people floating, and they're wondering what this is. So more or less same thing happens in the business today, that memory of our businesses today in its data. And as you know, and you heard in first session, and as board members and executives of various businesses, you know the importance of data. And the most commonly used three terminologies are: data is the new oil, data is the new soil, and data is the new currency. But all this sits into your memory or in your data, which is typically a historical data. Now, I know that it may be very naivety to talk about what's the definition of data, because the moment we talk about data, with my experience of interacting with numerous board members and executives and CEOs, their imagination is that data is only in numbers, or it is only in rows and columns. But I would like to set the stage in defining really what data is the information which is used as the basis of reasoning, discussions, and calculation. And again, Mr. Deshpande and Justice Sri Krishna took various examples about the data. And again, we heard from the executive from the Maharashtra IT that it's not just data which is being created from birth to death, but in between also. But the most important for this forum and for the sake of this discussion is really the information which is in digital form and that can be transformed or processed. So when we're talking about data, do not just look at the rows or columns or numbers, but it's really information, which is in a digital form and that can be transformed. So the topic we're talking about is really big data. So what is the difference between data and big data? And again, most of you may be familiar, but I love to set the stage in terms of talking about the basic definitions. Is really the data which has volume, velocity, and variety gets classified as big data. Now, why these three words are important? Because as board members, and I saw some of the questions coming in earlier session, is that as independent directors, how do you ensure a company using the data? And is it really useful data, or is it really a small data or a big data? But the most important for any artificial intelligence or machine learning to use the data should have volume, velocity, and variety. I would like to just spend a few seconds in talking about velocity. Is really the speed at which the data comes in. And this is one of the most important data for many, many businesses to take some crucial decisions. And the variety of the data. We heard Mr. Haribhakti and Mr. Deshpande talking about the internal and external, structured, unstructured data. So it is very important that the data should have this dimension of variety in order to get qualified as a big data. So as we just talked about, that if there is it is in the memory, then you can really imagine. The example I gave you about the native Indians, Americans who were looking at the boats, they couldn't see it. So if it is in memory, it can be imagined, or you can really see further in terms of what can happen. So if we classify data as memory of the businesses, and if we use artificial intelligence in order to process that data, which is what our human brains do, is what we are going to get is you can answer a lot of questions in terms of what, how, who, why, when, where. And there are a number of ways each of these technology is used in order to answer these questions. But the very common, which again, we all have used it, is the technology, which basically is the AI technology. What it defines in terms of what AI is one which learns, perceives, reasons, and solves problem from the data. Again, I'm repeating data a number of times, is moving from the big data to how AI is used, is that when you take a machine and make it learn the data, how it perceive, give reason, and solve problems. So the most common technologies used in the world today are the machine learning, natural language processing, and computer vision. Which these technologies, there are different types of technologies. And again, as a board members, you all should be at least familiar with these types of level of technicality, so that you can guide your company journey into this new world of data and AI, is that two most common are supervised and unsupervised machine learning, where you know your data, you know your output, and in second case, you know your data, but you don't know what you are looking out of that data. In natural language processing, which are most common applications of AI today you see from the data, is the text analytics, natural language bots, and text processing. And then in the computer vision, processing images and videos and audios. Now, again, why I'm sharing this with you is that when you talk about data, it's not just, again, rows and columns. It's images, it's videos, it's a text, it's unstructured content. And then various applications are built on top of it in terms of automatically analyzing the data, predictive and prescriptive analytics, like examples Dr. Deshpande took, or chatbots or voice bots, or using the text into predictive analytics, and processing documents intelligently, or analyzing the video content. And in order to run these applications, the most important, which again we heard in the first session repeatedly, is that you need not only just internal data, but internal, external, structured, and unstructured data. Now, just as a quick blurb on my company or what we do at Findability Sciences, and as Mr. Walia said in the introduction, the ability to find information was our forte when we started this company. But the ability to find information finally leads to artificial intelligence. So what Findability Sciences does is that we have a technology which is called Findability Platform, which uses all these supervised, unsupervised, machine learning, text processing, and image processing, and provides you analytics or information from your internal, external, structured, unstructured data. Now, what really you do with such type of stack is most of the companies want and know and been doing it for decades now is really what happened in your businesses. And this can be in every department, every section of your business, which is typically called as the descriptive analytics. And as Mr. Ahluwalia talked about the data analytics as a profession, the most of the data analytics profession is into what happened. But what is now this AI or the machine learning, text analytics, etc., is helping us to do is really to find out what will happen, which is typically called as a predictive analytics. But these I call personally as leading indicators in the business, where I can know that what will happen, and then in addition, what to do, which is the prescriptive analytics. And these are the most common AI applications in the market or in the businesses. You will notice that what will happen and what to do as two simple English questions applicable to every single department or businesses you might run. To just now give examples that using these types of technologies, how the problems are solved in terms of some very high level use cases and some of the work I am personally involved into it. One of the largest auto component manufacturer, they have thousands of components they supply to various electronic vehicles. We are forecasting prices for thousands of atoms on a weekly basis, and that helps them in managing their cost and managing their profitability. For a very large air conditioning manufacturer, you can take this data from internal, external, structured, unstructured. You can understand the nuances of what's happening in the market and predict very accurately what air conditioning equipments in which area, geographically diverse as well as climate-wise diverse, how much you can sell and how much forecasting is done for over next few quarters or few months. A very interesting use case being solved in the appliances industry, where most of the large appliances have been installed, particularly in North America, 30, 40, 50 years old wall ovens or large appliances installed in the old houses. They really work like horses for decades, but now when they need to be replaced, humans cannot simply answer those questions about specifications of equipment 30, 40 years ago. So you can train an algorithm through data and get answers from that to solve some of the challenges in customer service or supporting replacements. Another very interesting use case, you can use data to predict car prices. And when I'm taking this example is basically talking about, again, taking internal, external, structured, unstructured data. You can take maintenance record of automotive and feed to a machine learning algorithm and can understand what's the value of that vehicle is. We do for a very large investor occupancy and rent predictions for various apartments in America in various markets. And last but not the least is using computer vision or image processing. You can actually do what you're sending it into social media. Is it going to be seen? There is going to be engagement or not, etc. So with these use cases, the one point I want to illustrate to the board members is that use AI to move from firefighting to innovation, or use data science to move from firefighting to innovation, and not use data and artificial intelligence technologies only in solving some of your current challenges. And one last appeal, with again learnings of decade working in the global market, is that the board members should not look at only the financial ROI or measurable ROI when they are looking at use of data or AI for their businesses, but they should focus on even the strategic and capability ROI. Again, these are very interesting concepts and very interesting experiences and real value for businesses when you deploy data and AI. But for this, I would like to leave on this point for all the illustrious board members and executives on this call, is that when you are adopting data and AI for its benefit to the businesses, don't just look at the measurable or financial ROI, but look at how you are going to enhance the capability of your business and how strategic it is for your businesses in your AI transformation journey. So with that, I'm going to pass on to Sachin. So Sachin, can you unmute yourself and come online and share with us, in continuation with what I talked about, how big data and AI is used for various businesses with your experience of financial services. Can you give us the ideas about how data and AI is used in the financial services?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Sachin, very well.
Great. Well, first of all, good morning, Anand, and good afternoon, good evening, everyone. At the outset, let me express my gratitude towards Institute of Directors and specifically Vikesh ji for having me on this exciting forum, which, by the way, is highly relevant for Fiserv and for the financial services industry that I come from. I mean, that was a great introduction, Anand. You made it very, very simple, and you covered a lot of ground in a few minutes. I'll just build on top of that foundation which you laid. And so when I look at data, right, I can think of a few dimensions: so structured versus unstructured data, static versus streaming data, proprietary and licensed data that we own as an enterprise and any enterprise, versus external third-party or customer data that we don't own, but we are either the custodians of or we process it. And then there is raw data versus aggregated or transformed data. And then there's data which is in the public domain versus data that is personally identifiable, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all the sort of different types of data. And of course, with all of this data, we need to think about the lineage of that data, the quality of it, the processing of it, the inherent bias, which I think Mr. Deshpande talked about, whether that's inherent in the data or introduced by an AI or machine learning algorithm, while we're transforming that data to get deep insights from it. And then I think the whole game should be about not being data rich and insights poor, but really drive meaningful insights from that data, which sometimes can be like finding that proverbial needle in the haystack, given the sheer volumes of data explosion we all possess or see in the industry. And more importantly, acting, to your point, acting swiftly on those insights, because otherwise we're just being paralyzed with lots of insights coming at us if we don't act to ultimately delight our clients, as well as help our clients monetize those insights into net new, what I would call accretive revenue streams that ultimately then enhance the lives of our customers, regardless of what their business is. So before I sort of talk about the use cases, I mean, my perspective on this, Anand, is that if I look at the modern business architecture, I sort of look at it in 4 layers. And you talked about data and you talked about AI. At the base is the cloud, right? So most enterprise apps will be migrated onto cloud. Software-defined, containerized, virtualized, hosted on private, public, hybrid cloud securely. So that's kind of the base. The second layer on top of the cloud infrastructure is data, which we just talked about. I think the third layer, to your point, is AI, and that's everything from robotic to the cognitive end. So just the sheer process automation versus the intelligent automation. And that's natural language processing, that's machine learning algorithms that can be trained with mathematical models, it's analytics from data, business insights, to storytelling, to embedded insights, visualization, and then getting that AI right as a ethical and moral responsibility and eliminating bias from it. So that's sort of the third layer. And the fourth, which is the layer, I think, on top of any modern business architecture, is digital. And that's using that data and those AI-enabled insights, engaging with customers to ultimately deliver highly customized, highly differentiated experiences, tested with all kinds of user personas. And that's where increasingly 5G and augmented reality and virtual reality and 3D holographic imaging and a lot of these new technologies that are coming in, to your point, with streaming data, that are playing already a very vital role in transforming the user experiences and the way we just learn, play, and do business. So those are, if you like, my opening comments, Anand. I don't want to monopolize all the time, so I don't know if you want me to come in later to talk about the use cases, but those are some initial thoughts in terms of how I just look at data as a paradigm.
Great, thanks, Sachin. So maybe, yes, we can have Namrita share her views, and then we can come back with some of the, I would definitely want the audience to know how you have managed in the financial services, some use cases where data and AI is being effectively used for business growth. But Namrita, can you take over the mic and share your thoughts on this topic?
Thank you so much, Anand, and a big thank you to IOD for inviting me to this very prestigious forum. And a good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the different esteemed guests who are watching this webinar here today. So let me start by actually sharing my screen. I have a presentation which, let me know when you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, wonderful. So let me start by looking at what are some of the forces which are shaping the data first world today. Anand and Sachin did a brilliant job of actually laying the foundation of what is the data world. So I'm not going to go into those, but I will reference what Mrs. Bode said about the fact that, data is equal to power. And it's interesting because what that fundamentally means is that those who control the data really control the future, not just of humanity, but the future of life itself. And this is something that was shared by Professor Yuval Harari a couple of years back at the World Economic Forum when he was sharing his perspective on the future of a data-first world. In fact, he goes on to say that in the past, the control and ownership of land and industrial machinery was what divided human beings into different classes. But now data is replacing that. And if there is too much of concentration of data in a few hands, humanity will actually split into different species. And that brings me to the second point around moving towards data singularity. So singularity is really the convergence of man and machine, a turning point at which robots will also become as intelligent and can respond and interact with human beings just at an equal level. Now, based on the vision of singularity, we are still a very far way from that. Having said that, we are still generating a whole lot of data at an exponential rate. So at this point in time, we are generating something like 16.3 zettabytes of data every year. It's whether it is our clothes, whether it is our cars, whether it is our smartphones, our laptops, everything is generating data and it's being shared across the entire ecosystem. So while this level of data is being created and being shared, this gives rise to a huge opportunity for innovation as we move forward. And that is something which has actually come to the fore more so in this post-pandemic world, in this post-COVID world, because I think prior to the pandemic, the focus predominantly was around looking at operational efficiencies when one was thinking about data and analytics. And that shift has happened to looking at value creation in the form of new value pools, in the form of looking at new business models, looking at enhanced customer experiences, and many other things which weren't necessarily associated top of mind with data and analytics in this pre-COVID world. Which finally brings me to the fact that if so much of data is being created, there are some fundamental questions about who owns that data. And Chief Justice Sri Krishna talked about it, where he talked about the privacy by design. And of course, the GDPR has been the first step in that direction in terms of looking at, how in the EU, people are allowing the online identities to be owned and contained within that geography. And given that, that has actually become for a lot of businesses a competitive edge. And going forward, I'm hoping that, with the kind of seminal work that Justice Sri Krishna has done on the data protection law, once that is enabled, once that does come into force, that could result in similar kind of competitive advantages for India as a market. So given that we have these forces which are shaping our competitive advantage, what are some of the opportunities which come up? When we look at the opportunities, I think there are a whole host of new data-driven products and services which are coming into play. When I look at these, top of mind, again, something that all of us are familiar with would be Netflix as a classic example, the kind of personalized content that they're delivering based on individual preferences and the consumption patterns. Closer home in the chemical sector where I currently work, there's a disproportionate focus on safety. And in these COVID times, I think one of the things that we did amongst other products that we looked at building up, which were around the disinfectant space, was looking at using this data to build on our whole safety ecosystem. So building a product which could not just help us with giving predictive alerts on when a safety incident might get triggered, but also then it was extended to be used for all the social distancing norms, for facial recognition, and for all other use cases which typically one would associate with safety. In terms of data-driven business models, I think there is a whole shift which has happened in terms of doing that. And again, coming back to the sector that I currently work with at the Aditya Birla Group, our fertilizer business realized that selling fertilizers did not necessarily solve the problem that our customers were looking for. So it was really about saying, how can we take a step back and actually, using the data that we have about these farmers, create a platform which would enable them to not just get the product being sold through an e-commerce channel, but also allow them to get advisory services on when they should put in a particular crop for sowing, or when it should be harvested, and other associated queries that they may have, as well as look at bringing about a whole host of services which are complementary. And in totality, when you looked at the advisory services, when you looked at the products and the services, this then resulted in offering a yield improvisation as an outcome or as a solution to what the farmer was looking at, as opposed to just providing them with a particular product. Looking at better stakeholder experiences, I think, again, there is a lot of work which has happened over the last few years in this space. I think a classic example that I'll take from going back, one organization back when I was with the Mahindra Group, we realized when we were selling cars that the number of times that a customer entered the showroom had significantly dropped from 3.2 to 1.8 times. And the tipping point for making a decision on buying a car was the test drive experience. Alongside, we also had a data point which said that the industry attrition rate for sales executives was at about 30 to 35%, and we were no different. And so given that, how do we provide a consistent experience to our customers? And that is when we were one of the first organizations within the automotive sector in India to actually enable AI enabled chatbot, which actually could answer questions not just for the customers, but also for sales executives. And this resulted both in customer delight as well as faster turnaround on decisions which needed to be made in terms of, to buy a Mahindra car or not. I think the other area that I'd like to spend a little bit of time on is around this whole rise of ethical AI. And again, this was touched upon, by some of our, panelists, as well as some of the inaugural sessions that happened, in terms of talking about, how biases creep in, individual biases, even as we program and even as we look at creating models using AI. And the function over here really is around saying that how do we actually create a framework whereby we can make sure that the rate at which we are creating data has some kind of a measurement process in place in terms of ensuring that it is going through a decision matrix of, whether this is an ethical decision or not. We all have heard of autonomous cars being a classic example where ethics come into play. What do you do if the car was to self-drive and to take a decision of to save the car or to save the human being? That is just one example, but there are many such ethical examples which are being faced by organizations, by industries, and by governments today in terms of looking at the whole ethical AI space. And finally, again, Shri Haribhakti ji and other members who were speaking at the forum earlier talked about shaping a better world, and ESG is predominantly focused around looking at how do you use that data to make better decisions to actually future-proof the world moving forward. Some of the enablers for this change are really around looking at the data science maturity. While organizations have been investing a lot of money on data science maturity, but the reality is that only 26.8% of the firms have reported having a data first culture. 37% of the firms have reported that they were data driven, and 45% of the firms reported that they were now competing on data and analytics as per a new Vantage Partners survey which happened in 2020. And this was done across 1,000 senior executives who were responsible for data and analytics in their respective firms. So obviously we have still a fairly long way to go in terms of the maturity of the space. And this stems from the fact that, what is the kind of quality of data that we have available with us? Is the data also available? Again, there was mention about the fact of, internal data versus external data, and what kind of competitive advantage can that give us? If data is coming from different sources, the interoperability of that data then again becomes key in actually ensuring that we can break down those silos. The kind of digital infrastructure readiness that particularly legacy companies require is very different from, digital first companies when they start looking at saying we want to be computing at the edge and we want to be taking real-time decisions. Similarly, from a perspective of, looking at what kind of AI models should we be building and what do we need to do in terms of data stewardship, I think some of the things that come to mind, and again, a lot of organizations are focusing on, including us, is really that whatever data model is built, whatever AI model is built, it should be explainable, it should be robust. It should not be a black box. And that is something that we've sort of very diligently kept away from. And finally, I think in terms of ensuring that this change can actually take effect in organizations, the whole role of education and empowerment has been huge. And again, whether it is through building, center of excellences within an organization, whether it is about upskilling and reskilling the existing talent pool that we have, but making sure that that education pipeline, that awareness and education pipeline is continuously being, fed is extremely important. And once that has happened, then giving this same talent the opportunity to experiment and to fail fast really results in a truly empowered culture. So what is the role of boards in all of this? And that really brings 2 or 3 things to mind, from a data first world perspective. When we talk about better governance of boards, I've talked about the whole ethical piece, what are the ethical implications that come into being. And from a board perspective, it is important to make sure that we have some kind of a data governance framework in place to ensure that even at the board level, it is known what kind of data is being collected, where is it being stored, how is it being managed, and who's making the decisions regarding these issues. We need to know who are the business leaders within the organization who are responsible for this data governance. And then looking at the whole committee structure that typically boards have, do we need to really focus, besides cybersecurity, having some kind of data integrity committee, which looks at privacy, ethics, data hygiene, and some of these matters. The second aspect is around data and AI-led decision making. And some of you may be familiar that Jeff Bezos is obsessed with customers and customer centricity. And when we talk about that, you may have also heard the story that he actually kept an empty chair in any meeting, and that, he said, was to represent the customer. If we take that forward to the data world, the way I see the future, one of the things which is going to come into play, and in fact, it is already being done. In fact, there's a Hong Kong-based company which did it in as early as 2014, where they introduced an algorithm, and they gave a chair at the board to that particular algorithm. What the algorithm could do was compute data much faster, much better, and at a much greater scale than any human being could do. And what they could then do is enable the rest of the board members to make much better decisions. I see something like this coming into play at scale as we move forward. And finally, in terms of talking about increasing shareholder value, I think that is something that the boards look at continuously. But what needs to change over there is the focus on data. While there is a lot of focus on a lot of intangible assets, whether it is looking at goodwill or other factors, I think looking at data becomes important. And again, if we look at organizations by their market cap, whether it is a Warren Buffett, whether it is a Jeff Bezos, whether it is an Elon Musk, what they're focused on in terms of their strategy is on the data, and that strategy is clearly paid off for them. And with that, I would like to take a pause and return the podium back to Anand to take it. Yeah.
Thanks, Namrita. It was very detailed and interesting. Thank you. So coming back to Sachin, can you walk us through some of the examples that Fiserv in terms of its product and how they're being used to make the business useful, as I said earlier? So
thank you, Anand. Happy to. I'm conscious of time, so I'll make this quick. So building on Namrita, let me talk about a few use cases in the financial services industry, right? And I mean, the first thing I'll say is, arising from the current pandemic, an entirely new set of use cases are emerging across the whole life cycle of customer journey. So for example, contactless NFC-enabled credit cards and NFC-enabled ATMs for contactless withdrawal of money. If I were to classify these use cases into sort of themes, I can think of about 4 or 5 themes, right? So the first theme is what I would like to call pooling of data to creating a shared utility. So we have a product called Bank Analyst, which compares a bank with its peers, and a product called Radon, which does this pretty much the same thing for credit unions. So this is B2B example, and gives them amazing insights on customer behavior, such as onboarding conversion, customer attrition, spend patterns, what's the channel a retail customer prefers for their banking needs, from branch to ATM to web to mobile to call center, etc. So that's kind of the first sort of class of use cases. The second one, I think, is creating a holistic view of data to create real value for our clients, and then extracting some novel insights from what I would like to call unrelated data or disparate data sitting across multiple systems, right? And that could be either to create better offers, offer better discounts, price discovery, etc. So we have 2 products, one called Card Valet and another called Card Expert, that tell customers, among other things, what type of credit card would give them maximum loyalty points, for example, or helps customer understand and control their spend patterns across a credit card and a debit card, right? So that's kind of the second theme. The third theme is, and this would be relevant across all industries really, so this is not just a financial services example, data and analytics to improve the core business of an enterprise. And I can think of 2 things which are very relevant right now. One is HR analytics, because everywhere in the world, Anand, as you know, and all board members, I'm sure this is a big topic that is right now relevant. There's a war for talent, exacerbated by pent-up demand, and it has completely redefined location strategies and the strategies to attract and retain talent in today's socially distanced, low-travel world. And therefore, it's very important to hire right and hire for the new age skills and new attitudes. And so we use data and AI-driven resume selection, not just sort of to pick out keywords for skills, but also attitudes and aspirations matching successful employees that we have. Or we can use an AI-based tool to predict attrition based on associate engagement, salary benchmarking, reward and recognition, and a bunch of other factors, right? Now that's HR analytics. You can apply the same thing for something like go-to-market from a analytics perspective. And another example is based on client feedback, based on competitive analysis, it helps us predict data with AI combination, helps us predict license renewal probability, and then informs our product strategy around which products do we want to invest versus harvest versus perhaps decommission. The fourth theme is something I want to talk about here and now. The first three examples were probably more sort of global and financial services oriented. But right now here in India, the best example of big data, and Anand, to your point about volume, velocity, and variety, it ticks all the three boxes. I can think of e-rupee, where we have used data really innovatively in India to delight people, designed by Government of India. And all of a sudden, without the need for a ration card and without the need for even a bank account, we are using blockchain technology on top of Aadhaar-based identity of the big data for masses of Indians and giving them direct benefit transfer based on either an SMS to a simple mobile phone or a QR code that goes to someone's smartphone. And it's contactless, right? It's efficient, it's inclusive. You don't have to worry about KYC to open a bank account. It's easy, it's safe and secure. And if I may say so, many developed economies don't have something as sophisticated as this, created by Department of Financial Services and National Health Authority in the Government of India. And then the final example I'll talk about is a theme that says, and I think this is going to become bigger and bigger, responding to streaming data in terms of customer events, right? I mean, things like dashboards and reports are passé. I mean, that's table stakes. Those are things that have already happened, right? And you talked about predictive analytics. We at Fiserv, talk about event hub architectures to respond to any event. So for example, the best example I can think of is what we call hyper-personalized offers made to customers, combining their past behaviors, current choices, and location data. So let's say Anand is in Boston, he likes Chinese food, and he happens to be in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Based on your GPS location on a Friday evening, you get an offer that digitally pops up on your smartphone and is digitally redeemed, and that increases customer loyalty as opposed to you getting spammed with irrelevant offers. Another B2C example, and by the way, all B2C businesses are time sensitive, right? So you talk about Zomato or Swiggy, or in your country, let's talk about Uber Eats. It's all about kitchen time, route optimization, valet parking time, but ultimately you're trying to get the order delivered to the customer as quickly as possible. And all of this, by the way, is visible to the end customer. It's all about real time or near real time, responding to customer needs. And whether it's B2B or B2C, I feel what we are doing right now, and this is not just about Fiserv, but overall in the industries, we are codifying customer behaviors into a product or service to give systemic, consistent responses, but you're also providing enough flexibility for last-minute customization via something like a message bus, if I were to get technical, and personalization, so something like micro apps that you can easily rearrange. So before I conclude, I just don't want to get too technical, but I just want to say that fortunately, and as board members, we need to be aware that there is this whole confluence of various technologies. And I touched on blockchain, you're talking about big data and AI, but there's a whole bunch of technologies that are finally coming together, I think, to respond to business events in real time. And so we should, data warehousing and, the extraction, transformation, loading, all that is appliances, all that is the old world, right? Blue sky schemas for customer events, storing them in cache, like Redis kind of technologies, or automatic data ingestion across all kinds of data formats for massive volumes, or high availability data cloud architectures, or real-time or near real-time fraud management, reducing false positives enabled by AI, but also with technologies like Kafka and Snowflake. And then there are technologies like Spark that do in-memory calculations for fee calculations or same-day settlement or transaction reconciliation within minutes rather than hours or days. And I think it's, I sometimes feel that whether it's Zomato, Swiggy, or whether it's a bank, really all of these businesses are becoming technology businesses. And at the heart of that is data, and how they are not paralyzed by all of this data, but how they can use the confluence of all of these technologies across these use cases to really bring some meaning out of it, and then ultimately use that meaning to make some real-time or near real-time actions to delight our clients, and then our clients' clients in the case of B2B2C. So that's sort of my perspective, Anand. Back to you.
Thank you, Sachin. So those use cases were really very good, and you linking it to Zomato and Uber Eats, etc. Gives the visualization to everybody that how it works. So thank you very much. We have a couple of questions, but we are running out of time. So Mr. Walia, with your permission, I'm going to send my email ID in the chat window for everybody in case if anybody, and we'll follow up with some questions via email, and I will hand it off back to you, Mr. Walia.
Interesting session.
Can't hear you.
But I think, can you hear me now? Is it?
Yeah, now we can.
So, but we still have just 2 questions, and I would request Mr. Mahurkar to decide who answers to them. And these 2 questions definitely are, one is about, given that there's a lot of legal ambiguity in handling, storing, and using data amongst various countries, what should companies do to ensure they are compliant globally, not only in India? Also, what rules, jurisdictions would apply for data storage in cloud? In whose country's cloud the data is sitting?
Yeah, so I think maybe Sachin, you will be the right person because you handle very sensitive data for a lot of your customers.
Yeah.
And
in short, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, this is a very big topic. I mean, we could spend an hour talking about this. I would just say that you have to understand, you have to understand what is your role, whether you are the owner of the data, whether you're the custodian of the data, or whether you're the processor of the data, right? So that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is that you really, really need to spend time in understanding whether it's GDPR or any other region-specific or country-specific data laws that are out there. We certainly spend a lot of time understanding and engaging with relevant regulatory authorities as well as consortium of industry peers, because a lot of this can be open to interpretation, and a lot of these laws and regulations are constantly evolving. But I would say this, that we spend significant amount of time as an enterprise, and not just at the execution level, but at the planning and the strategy level, in taking these laws seriously, understanding the interpretations of those laws, and being on the right side of the law, both to protect our reputation, but more importantly, the reputation, the brand reputation of our customers, who are primarily banks, merchants, credit unions, community banks, etc., which are really the backbone of any economy. So that's kind of the high-level answer.
Good. I think that's broadly covers everything. But also related to this is another query from an independent director sitting in the audience. He wants to know what would be the indicators that I should look for to be assured of data adequacy and accuracy and neutrality are adequately addressed by the management.
So I will answer partly and then hand it off to Namrita with her experience as a user of all these solutions. But from my side, as a
Namrita is also an independent director now. Yeah.
Yes. So from a service provider angle, what we really tell our customers is that, and in fact, once a Forbes magazine reporter was interviewing me, and suddenly a line came out of nowhere, is that before you do AI, you need to have IA. IA is information architecture. So most of the board members or directors or executives jump onto AI journey because somebody else is doing it. But before you go there, there is a robust requirement of information architecture, and that takes care of all the points you just talked about. And the independent directors should always look at the possibilities of, do you have information architecture that will take care of data adequacy, quality, etc., etc. So Namrita, you want to add anything on what I said?
No, actually, Anand, you've answered it very comprehensively, because that is the starting point of looking at ensuring that you have, the right kind of adequacy and the neutrality. So that is built into your information architecture while you are looking at, putting that in place. So that is, I guess, the most comprehensive answer one could give.
Thank you.
Well,
So,
I
Mr.
think
Walia.
Thank you so much. These two questions have been answered. And over to Anand if he wants to conclude it now. Shall we?
No, so thank you very much for this opportunity. Sachin and Namrita, I enjoyed this. I hope the audience found this useful. So, Mr. Walia, we end our session and hand it off back to you.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a lot.
much. Thank you so much, Mr. Mahurkar. Thank you so much, Ms. Namrita and Mr. Sachin Kulkarni. Each one of you addressed very beautifully. Anand talking about how big data and AI adoption impacts the business. That's a big issue. Namrita took us through the journey of how all about thriving in data-driven world, right from auto industry to agriculture industry. And Sachin talking about how data-driven decisions delight the clients. Actually, when he said this is what is the core of his presentation, I was wondering how it would be delighting. I think not only he delighted the audience also. Thank you very much. And now we are running late for starting our next session. So before we start, I would like to thank every panelist here. And also we have with us Mr. Manoj Raut, our CEO. He is in the audience with us, and we have not given him time, but because he is the CEO and he maintains the discipline, he says, no, save time for the participants and for the audience benefit. Mr. Rajiv Kapoor, our regional director from Bangalore, is also in the audience and conveying regards to everyone. So I think we need to move to the next session. Before we move, we would like to thank our sponsors, Findability Sciences, and also IMA and the Bombay Stock Exchange, who have supported us in bringing this program today. And may I request Ravi to please play the videos for just 1 minute, and then we'll move to the next session. Thank you very much, everyone. Wow, that's good, Ravi. Thank you so much. And now it's time for us to move to the next session, which is all about, we are a couple of minutes late. Mr. Sarda, I think we are late about 15 minutes or so exactly. And I'll request you to help us with that bit of time management. And so this next session is all about the big data, critical challenges, failures, and managing present and potential future risks. Every asset comes with a liability also. Every coin has got two sides. If one side is asset, the other side has to be liability. And managing the two together beautifully, that's the job of the CIOs, the technology companies, and the technology businesses which are there. And we have the best of people. I would say number one company, and TCS people are going to catch me for that. Accenture MD, Mr. Shrikant Sharda, is going to be heading and chairing this session, supported by Mr. Rajesh Sinha, CEO of BSC E-Agriculture Markets Limited, and also supported by Mr. Tushar Wagal, who is the CIO and the digital head at Larsen Tuber Reality. I am short of time, so I would like to, limit the huge credentials and the potential, the introductions that we have, but still, I can't do without introducing Mr. Shrikant Sharda, who is the Managing Director of Accenture Technology. Mr. Sarda is a MD at Accenture Technology, a $45 billion company with more than 550,000 employees globally. Shrikant, with his multiple business-centric patents in data technologies, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, is an authority in helping businesses to achieve competitive advantages outside the professional network. Shrikant is a mentor for change for Government of India's flagship Atal Innovation Mission, which is also one of my favorite programs, and I'm also on the same board. Programs for startup companies. He is also an academic advisor to management and technology universities in India. Also lectures and shares his knowledge with many board sessions that IFD conducts. We are really grateful to him. He's also a certified independent director from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. And next we have with us is Mr. Rajesh Sinha. He is the Chief Executive Officer at BSC Agricultural Markets. He has been the champion of introducing NCDX also in the country, and prior to joining Bombay Stock Exchange, he was the Managing Director and the CEO at NCDX E-Markets Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary of NCDX. At NEML, he played a vital role in remodeling the businesses in profitable e-spot markets and services company for commodities in India. Mr. Sinha is an agriculture graduate from Banaras Hindu University with a management degree from IRMA, and he has been an alumni from Harvard Business School, Boston Kellogg's School of Management, Chicago, and ISB in Hyderabad, and also IIM Ahmedabad. He brings very rich experience and academics with him to do justice to the session today. Then we have Mr. Tushar Wagal, who is the CIO and digital head at Larsen Tuber Reality now. He has played multiple roles within the L&T group with more than 15 years of experience. He brings very, very rich experience in strategizing and implementing the information technology and digital solutions for sustainable growth for large and highly competitive businesses like L&T, which is into so many businesses and started now the business of reality. He has delivered quality, speed, scale in multiple projects, handling and managing huge data and highest governance standards in managing all this. And he has also been part of many startups, and he loves to talk to his audience, and he's a very sought after speaker. I'll request Mr. Sarda to kindly lead this and chair, and please give a great time to all the audience that we have here. You have very good panel with you. So, Mr. Sarda, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vikesh ji. Good to have you and to speak to this audience. Since you mentioned we are running short of time, I will try to keep it very short. And you mentioned about that we heard about the data competitiveness, how it can create a competitiveness. And in this session, we will talk about what are the challenges out there and how organization and businesses needs to take care of those challenges so that they are successful in their business. So, and data, we have been talking for the last 2 hours, has been an integral part of human race for many, many decades, centuries, and thousands of years, right? Data is captured in various forms, paintings, manuscripts, documents, and is typically used to communicate one's point of view and stories. During ancient time, the data capture was limited and very labor-intensive activity. However, as the human race evolved, backed by industries and technology, the data capture has become very easy and affordable. Today, we are in a human plus machine industrial age, or industry X.0 as we call it. The amount of data generated and captured by companies is increasing exponentially. If I go by World Economic Forum, the amount of data produced globally is increasing, estimated at about compounded growth rate about 61%. And one of the study by World Economic Forum indicates that each day we are generating more than 500 million tweets, about 300 billion emails, 65 billion WhatsApp messages, and more than 700,000 hours of content is added on YouTube every day. It is expected that by 2025, more than 175 zettabytes of data will be produced. And just to put in context, zettabyte is 8 followed by 21 zeros bits. So when one compares data, and Vikeshji earlier in his speech mentioned that data is new fuel or oil. When we compare data to oil in the new economy, it is not an odd comparison. Both these raw materials can be used or turned into money through skill utilization and processing. The only difference that I see is that oil reserves are dwindling, while the amount of data to process is increasing every day and every hour. The other key difference is that while oil refining process is relatively fixed, data monetization approaches and the processes keeps changing every day based on the industry, based on the customer segment, and based on the product offering that your company is doing. So since there is an enormous amount of data being generated every day, converting data into actionable insight, and Anand mentioned earlier, Shaileshji also mentioned, that data insight and creating is very, very important, and converting data into wisdom is equally challenging activity. We have seen how data can be used for a competitive advantage. However, large amount of data could also pose a significant challenge as well to business. And these challenges, if are not managed properly, it could lead to a very negative impact on the businesses. So let's look into some of the challenges that business needs to address while managing data. And for simplicity, I will take the 3 V's that Anand mentioned in his speech about challenges related to volume, challenges related to velocity, challenges related to variety of data that is being captured. And I added one more of my challenge, which is the security and data privacy related challenges, which Shaileshji mentioned, that Justice Shri Krishna also mentioned in his speech. And it is important that all the organization and businesses addresses this all 4 challenges at the same time to get a better actionable insight from the data mining and data analytics. Typically, each organization has a very robust, defined enterprise data storage systems, which are suitable for moderate increase in the data. However, the volume that I mentioned, about 60% growth annually, these systems are not suitable to handle that huge amount of volume. Additionally, with the data privacy related issues and the regulations, regulatory compliances are also increasing the number of the years of data that you need to, as companies or business, need to store. These factors are increasing how much data can be processed and how much time it takes to process data and get that required insight. The second challenge that business are facing is about the speed or velocity with which data is being generated. Most of the companies has done the digitization of their internal processes. They have done the customer touch point are increased. They're all digital customer touch point. And these challenges are facing the business are getting this huge amount of data. They are not able to address it. And that is becoming in a time sense, especially the data is time sensitive and transient in nature. If they are not processed very quickly, it becomes a challenge how to use the data and get insight from that. The third challenge, which is unique for this digital age, is about the variety of data and the sources from where this data is being captured. In the earlier days or earlier era, the data capture was very simple. It was limited sources and a limited number of attributes were captured. But now you have data coming from social media side, you have data coming from WhatsApp, multiple online and offline touch points with the consumers. And each data is coming in a different format, have a different and no defined attribute. So getting the data insight from this unstructured data is becoming extremely challenging. And the fourth challenge, which earlier also was referred, is that how do the businesses keep this vast amount of data coming from so many different sources safe and secure? Data privacy and security is becoming one of the biggest challenges that businesses need to address today. And to ensure that they are having this competitive advantage, we have come across many real life stories where the data loss has resulted into millions of losses to the company, and more importantly, the damage to the reputation of the brand. Now that I covered broadly the various challenges the data or big data generates for the organization, let's look at what organization and businesses can do to address these challenges. And to make it keep it simple so that you can take some action on this one, is there are two ways I see it can be addressed. One is a technological way of addressing these big data related challenges, and second one is organizational changes that you can do. I mentioned about volume related challenges, velocity related challenges, and a variety of data related challenges. The number of attributes which are used to derive the data is increasing, and it is not possible to use human brain to use these various attributes and get insight, or also with the traditional computing power. Fortunately, we have now, from technology wise, you have a cloud technologies, both private and a public cloud, sometimes even hybrid cloud. These technologies are very matured, and businesses should leverage these technologies to get operational efficiency and derive the data insight at the right time using the right amount of data required for the business. Second one is we mentioned about AI and ML. So data is not useful unless you use a lot of AI ML algorithms on the data to get actionable insight. So you should look at leveraging AI ML to get a data insight from the huge amount of data that you store. And the third, this one is the data-driven organization needs to look at a robust data governance and management processes so that the data is secure and available as required. Now, important aspect, and I think Namrita also mentioned and Anand also mentioned about this one, is data insight is typically derived on the aggregate level and not at individual data. And so it is important that the data that is being used for artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms, having a good quality. If quality is not good, your outcome, the AI ML will give you wrong outcome and wrong insight, which will be impacting to the business. I know one of the telecom global provider, they saved about $100 million in cost by improving the quality of data that they were holding in their system. The last point about is the organization structure that is should enable, and we spoke about that earlier, about the talent that is required. The typical talent that you have in the organization may not be suitable for the data-driven organization. So you need to look at what kind of data scientist that you need, what kind of data engineer that you need, what kind of a chief digital officer and that kind of a roles that you need, and what role they will play in the organization. Now, the last point that I would like to make over here, which is about how to take care of these challenges, is when we talk about data-driven organization, it is very important to have a very clear understanding about what outcome as an organization you would like to achieve from a data insight. This will help your data team, data scientists, to implement a proper algorithm and remove the biases from the data or algorithms and give you an outcome which you can use in your businesses. So to summarize, this one, data is a very important, very lethal kind of ammunition that you have to make a competitive advantage. But at the same time, there are some challenges that big data and the huge amount of data kind of generates or poses for the organization. And some of the point that I mentioned, if as a business, if you are able to take care of that one, you have a sustainable competitive advantage in the marketplace. I'll stop over here and I maybe invite Rajesh to share his thoughts from what he is doing it in the BSc in the e-agricultural market and how we are using data and addressing the challenges. So Rajesh, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Shrikantji. And I thank IIOD and Mr. Vikesh Walia to giving me this opportunity Am I audible clearly?
Yes, Rajesh. Yes, Rajesh.
Yeah. So what we are really, I would not really take the data company perspective. I think we already have heard luminaries like you and Mr. Mahorkar and a host of us here. So let me take the user's perspective on how do we look at the big data. So when I come to BSc, I see that it's world's fastest exchange with a speed of less than 6 milliseconds. Okay. And I come from a background where we say if something is running, you make it walk, and if it is walking, you make it stop. And that we are talking about water percolating down to the water table. Otherwise, water will run off. So you have to save water. Now, crop per drop is another anthology that we really keep thinking about. We also keep thinking about why our edible oil production has not increased. We were self-sufficient in 70s, 80s, and how we import more than almost 60 to 70% of our edible oil seeds that we eat. At one end, we have a ban of GM crop, whereas we import 80% of the edible oil we import is all genetically modified crops. Now, this is an open thing. It's also a part of the data, but let's look at going into this agribusiness, the genomic sequence. If you look at pulses, let's take bread, lentils. Now that genomic sequence has not been decoded and it's not a responsive crop. So if you look at a hybrid tomato seed, a desi, which is a country where IT produces, has the seed potential is to produce 8 metric ton an acre. If you take a hybrid seed, just by replacing that, it can go up to 60 metric tons. And it's so input responsive that you could increase it. That's not the case with our pulses. So some of us should take that challenge to see how we can really make that responsive. The revolution in corn, revolution in wheat came only because of that's one side of the data that we are really talking about. It's a very, very different world that we talk about. And today, there is no difference between so-called a pharma genealogy sequencing or you're looking at agri. In fact, the worlds are really merging today. So if you look at genomic research, it's a very, very different way, and that could be at the core of solving our food problem, self-sustainability problem. We need to have an input responsive crop so that we could grow a little more. Now let's look at agribusiness per se, which I keep doing. So here we are looking at stock exchanges, which in my view need to innovate more, but I will keep it at that. And we are really doing a lot. That's very different world. And I neither have the capability nor the caliber to respond on that side because that's equity and securities and debt and bonds, and that's a different world. It's a regulated world. What I work on is the agri markets. So if you really look at today, each and everyone who has something to do with agriculture wants to move backwards or forward. So if you're a warehouse service provider, you think that just because you have that source of farmer from or depositor, you want to go backward. So agri-stack, Government of India wants to create an agri-stack where they have taken model 100 villages, where they will take individual data of farmer from the individual side to the crop production side, then on the market side. It's a huge piece. Now, are we really saying that agri-stack, as we talk about, is it limited to governments? No. Every other day you will hear one or the other company trying to get into it. So we are all banking on something which has become so commonplace today. The availability of data itself that all the speakers have already talked about, that has been abandoned. But the accuracy of data is something that we still need to work on quite a lot. So while blockchain is a great technology, if you made a mistake somewhere, which is still commonplace, and that gets directly linked to the talent pool that we talk about, our rural villages are actually, they may, the time a good caliber professional develops there, he simply moves out of the village. So village in a way is left out with the talent pool, which are neither equipped so well and are not capable to handle the kind of technologies we are talking about. And that also links directly to the kind of education policies and everything else that we are talking about. So some of us, especially these large technology companies that I think Mr. Shrikant Shada and everyone else is looking at, one of the top priorities should be to make agriculture more attractive so that youth remains there. And India is going in the same direction as US or Japan, where as a percentage, direct dependency is getting lesser, where productivity is increasing. So there, if we really look at, we need to find a way where our youths continue to get educated. The way almost 2 decades ago, when I used to go and visit agriculture markets, and not very long ago, just 5 years ago, the challenge used to be on, oh my God, how can we have data? They don't understand technology. Today, thankfully, with mobility, mobile penetration, and a lot of work that has happened on the data side, and the deeper penetration of the technology infrastructure improvement, that's no longer a challenge. Nobody says that we don't, this is tech is not available there. So now comes the challenge of when you're really looking at data, what is that accuracy of data and whose data is it anyway? Is agriculture a state data? Is it the data of a village or panchayat who are the owners, or of the individual itself? Are you addressing that person as a consumer? Then you are having one ration card, one person, and these are dilemmas of policymakers. Or are you talking about that person as a farmer who is producing, and then you want to really look at him or her as a farmer? Which you need to take? Our governance is from a Panchayati Raj ecosystem, Panchayati Raj to a block, to a tehsil, and all the way up to a state and a country. Whereas when we look at public representatives, it's not. Constituency is a factor of population and a host of other factors, which does not have the same boundaries as in district or in blocks. How do we merge this? So a lot of, when you're really getting into policy, so when we are looking at creating markets now, how do we use this data to create more efficient marketplaces? Should it be seller driven or should it be buyer driven? Even today, not very long ago, you had people in Karnataka throwing up tomatoes for 50 paisa, and that happened even in Nasik. And it's every year it happens for a few days. Whereas in Mumbai or Delhi, we are buying tomatoes as 10 or 20 rupees a kg, or at least 40 rupees a kg in many cases. So this, how do we use this data and the technology to make this value chain more efficient? Developed world like US and Canada, they have resolved this. We don't have inefficient spot markets. So I would say, I can again go on the market side and look at it from a user perspective. So all the points have been really, really valid. I will really stop here in the interest of time. And anything related to, I would say, agri markets or policy, right from farmer production, conclude by saying we don't even know what is the true number of agriculture markets, main agriculture markets. You say approximately 2,500. So it is 2,000, 2,500, we don't know. How many farmer households are there? Different data sources have different number of households. How do we define them? What is the land? Then you go to the soil. So there is an abundance of it. Who owns it? And then comes who will use it. And then if we use who monetizes it. So there are a lot of pieces into public-private right now, and we are right in the middle of the churn, and we are experiencing that. And we'll possibly know once you get out of it, you can go back in the rear view mirror and say, oh, this is what it was. Okay, so I will just stop at that. I'm sure there is a lot of discussion already happened on it. But from a user side, literally, I don't know how to use it to make sure that whose data essentially to enhance the income of smallholder farms, how do we use that data? And whether he's a consumer or a farmer, and how do we see that we don't have a separate iCard for a farmer? We already have a Kisan card. Now we will have a new smart card. So these are all very valid pieces that are happening. But as people who now understand data and India is in the forefront of it, how can we help policymakers to resolve that in a better manner so that it really, we don't get into more duplicity? Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. Very interesting insight on the data and how it can help farmers and transform that entire agriculture sector. Next one, I will invite Tushar to share his thoughts, especially in the realty industry, which is also related to land, but a different set of industry. So Tushar, over to you.
Thank you, Shrikant. So first of all, dear seniors and fellow panelists and my sponsors. Okay, so we are really grateful that this event is arranged, and it's a great pleasure also. So I'll start by saying that we are going to move into a oil-less world in the next decade. Okay, so oil is going to go away. Right? So that is going to be a problem area. Right? So we are still not prepared, not going towards that.
what is going to happen is people are still having a fetish on we can say outcome base, all working on outcome. Now is the time to develop habits. Okay, so for example, the environment is really going down. Okay, we need to take control of that. The ESG has become very popular. So what exactly has to be done? Okay, so like New York City has a rule made which says that by the year 2050, 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions are going to be reduced. 80%, and they have a decade-wise target. We have to form the habit. We have to do atomic habits. That mindset has to happen. We got to make a hierarchy of people who are going to work that way. In America, they are having CTOs and CIOs and CDOs for each city. A city has a CIO. So imagine the effort being put in to go into that direction. We are still not going in that direction. Okay. So big data is very nice. Okay. You spoke about the volume, the veracity, and the, you can say the velocity, the variety and the velocity. There are two more aspects to it. Okay. One is that it is a veracity, the trueness of data. The trueness of data is still missing. Okay. And then there's also dogmatism. People say, okay, my data is right. I don't care about other person's data. They're still not digesting the fact that the data is changing. Okay. And they have to accept it. So those are the problems which we have. Now, if you talk about the problems, okay, which is there in the challenges of process, we need to capture the data, we need to integrate the data, we need to transform the data. Okay, these three things are there. And top of that, you got to have the right model and analysis to provide that. Now that's a different problem. Okay, now how to capture data? Now we are still building apartments and offices with normal electric, you can say normal electric methods. Okay, so that's very sad. Okay, that's very sad. Can you see my slide?
Yes, Tushar.
Yes. So basically, people are still capturing. Okay, basically doing the same old thing. There are devices which capture, okay, and work on PoE, power over Ethernet. Each and every device in the office has to be PoE enabled. There's no second thought about that. You do PoE, you do Zigbee, you do whatever. They have to be connected. The wiring has to stop. You need to have data cables going anywhere, or you need to have Wi-Fi going anywhere. That is the only way to go ahead. Okay. See, at L&T, we're building a whole ecosystem. Okay, an ecosystem by which you can capture data about the whole building. Okay, because 67% of the greenhouse gas emission is because of buildings. We have to control it. We have to form the habits. In America, in a similar type of housing, they observed that a few houses had 30% less electricity. Now, why was that? Because those 30% people, okay, had the energy meters on the normal floor and not the basement. What you measure, okay, you can get. I have a few slides which talk about that also. Just imagine the number of sensors which you put into a single building. A single building, a million square feet, would maybe cost you maybe $100 million. Okay, that's the way it is. You just spend 5% more, and you have all these. Now people say for a million square feet building, a 10 lakh square feet building, which is housing 5,000 people, why should I spend 50 crore rupees to make it smart? You can use the space better. If that space is being used by 4,000 people, you're making 20% more people sit there and optimizing the meeting rooms and everything. That itself is a benefit. You are saving 200 crores on the first year itself. So this mindset has to change. That is still not changing. You got to have dashboards everywhere. Okay. This is that New York gas emission thing. It has become so popular in like New York. Everybody has to do it. There is no way out. There are measurements being done year on year. That's the way it is going to go. I'll just move on. It is a time. So this is what we are building. So this is a pilot model. If it works fine, there are 50,000 buildings in New York City. Bombay also itself has around 10,000 buildings. and we are consuming a lot of energy and space. We have to optimize. We have to make the city much, much better. The houses, a lot of things is being wasted. So the future is about smart mini cities, because it's not possible to really make a very, very smart city, okay, at one go. You need to you need to divide the cities into multiple pockets. Okay, you got to make, you can say, 50 sub-cities and focus on them. Okay, we are building such a smart city, or you can say a small mini city of maybe 100 acres. This is a way forward. You have to use technology. You have to capture data. There is no way out. That's the only way to enjoy life, and that's the only way to survive in this holocaust. If I come to the corporate world, okay, the corporate world unfortunately is still in that world of, you can say, the corporate world. They are not moving to the web scale IT. They have to move to web scale IT. Google, Azure, everybody's web scale. The corporate world is still there, still building data centers, still doing what they want to do. You got to an objective. Please have your objectives and move on. People talk about security. Just outsource your security. Just outsource your volume, your velocity. Just outsource. There are so many companies which can take over. Don't waste your time on that. Security, we do a yearly body check. Same way we do a complete company body check on cyber security. That's the way out. Pay the $1 million. Don't think of the $1 million. Think how can you make $1 billion more every year. Don't save the million. That's all I have.
Thank you, Tushar. And I think it's interesting to see how the smart cities you are thinking about building, maybe brick by brick, using the data to make it even smarter kind of a city.
Yes.
I know we are kind of very, very late, and we may not have. So, Vikeshji, I don't know whether we have time for any questions, because we are 5 minutes to our scheduled time. Vikeshji, you are on mute.
I have a couple of questions, but I think I'll have to wait and send it to you via email, and then you can respond to the respective persons. And for the sake of time, we need to be closing it now. So I don't see any raised hands so far. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the participants, and to Shrikant particularly for leading this discussion. And it's very, very interesting. Both the other panelists also brought good perspective. Rajesh told us about how data is going to give advantage to agriculture in the country. And Tushar explained how data is going to give advantage, and how data is going to be safeguarded for all the users. And you have already given an overview of it. So thank you very much. We look forward to your time again. And we are now coming to close of the session. So I'll request Mr. Pradeep Chaturvedi, he's our Vice President, to kindly give a summary of all the sessions, and he will share and refresh about the whole program of 3 hours. I think that will be a good refresher. So may I invite Mr. Pradeep Chaturvedi. He's our Vice President and brings rich experience at IOD. He has been leading, supporting, and guiding IOD for the last 20-25 years. So may I request Mr. Pradeep Chaturvedi, our Vice President IOD, to please, I'm shortening your introduction, Chaturvedi Sahab.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Time, and you have also been waiting.
Fine.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be associated with this program on the board's perspective, the promise and perils of data. Now, this is one of the very important topics people do not realize, where the data can really create the whole world. It can also destroy the most of the possibilities, the options that we have under difficult times. It's not that we have just realized when the pandemic took place now, that when you have to think of the technology applications for overcoming the problems combined with the climate change, how the quantity of data that is developed, that has been processed analyzed in such a short time and presented for the benefit of the mankind. The whole world of technologies is now moving on from just hardcore technologies to the human-centric technologies that again results into very intricate data which has to be interpreted for the boardrooms, for the directors to understand as to where all they have to make options available. This is quite a big shift within the last 3 months, and many more options have to be really applied to understand as to how this data can be really used. And the data cannot be created as it was pointed out. The data is the internal data, the external data is the images, it's all kinds of data. It's not just numbers that we are talking upon alone. And that's how, and with the privacy policy that has come in and the cybersecurity threats that we have, the intricacies are really increasing day by day. The IoT has been really focusing on this issue, and we hope that very shortly we'll be coming out with many more security-related issues that can be considered. There are many options. The speakers, the distinguished speakers focus on what all should the directors be asking from the companies, and in turn, what all the companies may be expecting from the directors to effectively utilize. You see, there are two ways getting the data and utilizing it effectively. So the point is that are we able to collect the right kind of data, analyze in the right real time? And that's where the analytics have been playing an important role. New techniques are emerging and new methods are coming in. We can create more opportunities out of many of the difficult situations. As many of the companies which switched over to digitalization during the last two years, they found that this pandemic, which was really a problem, has created many opportunities. We have a number of unicorns are born who could move on to the digital platform. And these options have to be really seen, but we have to really have a process where the technologies and the data that is being generated, the new supply chains that are being created, the new technologies that are emerging, are we able to apply the machine learning processes and artificial intelligence in the right way? Data in the organization, the ability to generate high quality internal and external data was pointed out as a sustainable, in a sustainable manner, was considered to be an option which gives you the cutting edge. Adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning across critical processes of the organization and its manner, where it is contextualized for the business, was the second important application that was being considered. We will be, in due course of time, we shall be reskilling a large number of manpower, even those who are onto the computer sciences, to really get into the new kinds of technologies and really to be creating the new kinds of opportunities that we have. We had two technical sessions, harnessing the era of abundant data for building a sustainable competitive advantage. And we really found that in whether it was in the financial sector or the industrial sector, we're all and how we could really apply and get the advantage. We had in the last session on critical challenges, failures, and managing present and potential future. It was pointed out how into the agriculture sector, into the realty sector, also the technologies have really played important role, and the data acquisition and data mining, data presentation were so important. In short, we can say that a few points that I thought I'll summarize instead of giving everyone's point, that the following steps were considered very appropriate to buy in for data for analytics and strategies. First was set a strong vision that resonates with the stakeholders. If you really want to set up a strong vision on data sharing and data processing, you have to be having a very good dialogue and communication with your stakeholders, and these must be such that it sinks into them, they understand and feel that this will be acceptable to them. Then you have to call out the innovators. Many of the companies and many of the operations, you'll find there'll be many people who will be having the inhibitions initially. You have to find a way to see that those inhibitions are driven out, and we are able to really put forth as to how the data processing, data analytics, and this presentation will really be advantages to the companies, to the boards, and boards have also to realize and sharpen their skills. The third point is to trace underlying data back to the business outcomes. You have to really trace, and we have to really treat and see that how it can be projected, that the data analytics is certainly a very important element for the outcomes in the businesses. The fourth point that I'd like to say is present the roadmap in business terms. You have to present, it's not just only the analysis of the data alone, but linking it with the financial perspective, the operations, and then trying to project whether it's supply lines, supply chains, or what are other things that we should be able to present a future roadmap as to how we are able to switch over to AI or ML and then see that this data is really processed at a fast speed in the real time. The companies will really benefit. The fifth point was to illustrate a cost-benefit analysis and summarize within overall business initiatives. It is very necessary, it's just not sufficient to present a cost-benefit analysis, but to integrate into the business, whole business operations, and to let the board know, the board discuss, and board and the management be able to show that these will ultimately help the overall business initiatives. That will be an important thing. And the last point that I'd like to say is that you have to kickstart the data and analytics initiatives where whatever companies is not been done. It has also been recently realized that just calling for digitization and digitalization, it is not sufficient to understand these two terms and to move over. There are a large number of companies which might have moved very fast into the process of digitalization, but there are others which are called the laggards, who during the last 2 years have caught on, and they are almost at par, and they are trying to find out the new ways to move on. So you have really to see there will be a mix between the present policies, the present way of working, operations, and the moving on to the digitalization. And that is where the whole data processing, data analytics, and data mining are important, and understanding by the boards is very, very important. And I must congratulate our chairman of the Western Region, Hari Bhakti ji, and Vikesh Wale ji for all the hard work that they've done to put this idea forward and to bring all these experts on the panel and for the benefit of all of us. Thank you very much, Vikesh ji, for all that you've done.
Chaturvedi, we sincerely appreciate your good summary. Is going to be a good capsule for everything. So before I start my word of thanks, I would firstly like to invite all of you to our next program, which is going to happen on October 6th and 7th. Annual Directors Conclave by IOD is a very flagship event of IOD, and it is very, very awaited kind of an event. We are going to hold it on October 6th and 7th. And the theme for this is going to be creating a future-ready board for investment and inclusive growth. So kindly join us for this, and you will find huge, stuff on corporate governance and how to create future-ready boards. It's going to be very, very interesting. So I look forward to meeting you all there. And now I would like to thank our sponsors, which is Findability Sciences, IMA, and BSc, Beam. All these sponsors have supported us in bringing this event to you, and we look forward to their support again in the future as well. The web team at Delhi has been a great support, and I would like to thank Ravi and everybody in the team out there in giving us a good support, which is absolutely flawless, except for some initial issues with the registration might have been there, but I think it has been excellent throughout. And the IOD Mumbai team, headed by all the event management team of Sharad, Preeti, and Manoj, Anup, and Purnima. all of you, thank you very much for being a great support in constructing this event and helping me in putting it up. Thank you so much. And I look forward to meeting you again soon. And we look forward to your support to IOD Mumbai again as well. Thank you so much and look forward to seeing you again. Ravi, would you kindly play the videos? Thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, Chaturvedi sir, thank you so much. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So you're on mute, sir. So you're on mute.
Yeah. Thanks, Tushar. Thank you, Preeti, Sharad, Purnima, Manoj, Anup, everybody. Ravi in Delhi.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.